Hello, dear viewers. Support me by subscribing to my channel and share my video if you like it. And also, make sure you comment your thoughts. Now let's start the video. The small band of travelers moved swiftly about the wild, leaving the road as quickly as possible and doing their best to keep out of sight for the most part, not trusting any traveler that could possibly meet them on the road. They stopped only at night, and the fire they would create would be small and surrounded with a sort of teepee-like barrier to keep the flames from being seen off in the distance. Strider had added something that even hindered smoke from being visible to sharp eyes. Harry managed to catch a rabbit, though that was out of sheer luck. He had been taught how to set a snare and stepped back to examine it, and the rabbit jumped out of the bush behind him and ran right into the trap. Strider dressed it, and Sam and Harry roasted it slowly over the flames. Strider was proud of how Harry was able to catch the rabbit, but Harry didn't tell him how the events occurred. Harry sprinkled a few herbs he had found along the paths. They had traveled down. Harry at first didn't recognize some of them, but Sam pointed them out to him and helped him experiment with their flavors and scents. Sam was, in Harry's opinion, a great teacher when it came to gardening. Though they didn't have the time to plant posies or anything, Sam just pointed out where herbs and vegetables were hidden in nature's garden. Strider came back after patrolling about looking for any stray bandits or any trace of the ringwraiths. He saw no signs that they were within the immediate area and began to head back. He smelled the scent coming from the rabbit and smiled. "Even out in the wild, you're a champion cook," said Strider, sitting down, but keeping his sword held tightly in his hand. "It was actually thanks to Sam here. He helped me find the herbs I wanted," said Harry with a smile towards Sam. Harry took out several small wooden plates and placed pieces of meat on them. After a few bites, Merry and Pippin tried sneaking food off of Harry or Sam's plate. They didn't dare try Frodo or Strider's plate. Sam would attack them if they had gone after Frodo's plate, and Strider had already smacked their hands. After they enjoyed their very delicious meal, the hobbits laid down to sleep till morning. Strider peered around into the darkness and listened intently to surrounding woods. "How many days till we get to where we need to go?" asked Harry, handing him an apple from his bag. 8 days or so," said Strider, looking up at the stars quickly. "It all depends on the swiftness of these hobbits, though I can't put much stock in them being quick." "Well, no, not with such short legs, but they make for it by keeping up with you and your tireless pace," said Harry with a smile. "So you're keeping up just fine and you aren't all that tall," said Strider with a smile. "Running's a hobby of mine," said Harry with a shrug. "According to some adults, I should do it more often than I do already." He sighed and looked up at the stars. "Thinking of the young barmaid?" asked Strider with a fond smile. "Only during the day. During the night, I think about home," said Harry, still looking up at the stars. "I miss the castle, my friends, the teachers, Sirius." Tears slowly fell down his face. "I'd give anything to go back home." "What about Anya?" said Strider. Harry sat in silence for a short while. "I don't want to leave her, but it's better this way, me leaving. What sort of happiness could I give her, especially if I keep thinking about home and where I come from? She could get really sick from how unhealthy my home is," said Harry thoughtfully. You could be labeled as noble as a Lord Harry. I know a few people that could use some of your nobility," said Strider with a smirk. "I don't know about that," said Harry with a faint blush. "Do you want me to keep watch tonight?" "No, I'll keep the watches. I know what to look for and hear for," said Strider, "unless you wish to learn." Harry smiled. "I'd love to. That way you can get some sleep," said Harry. "I can go days without it, but if you insist," said Strider. Hours passed as Strider taught Harry all what the sounds in the night meant. Towards the dawn, he quizzed Harry in what the sounds meant. Harry managed to only get 2 sounds out of 20 correct. "Well, looks like it'll take another night or 2 of teaching to get you familiar with the most common of sounds," said Strider kindly. "If I ever do," said Harry with a slightly guilty smile. They traveled all that day. Harry yawned twice, but after splashing his face with cold water from a stream they had passed, his stamina and alertness rose. "There's where we will rest tonight, Weathertop. We Rangers visit this place once a year to pay homage to our fallen ancestors. If anyone comes, we will see them," said Strider. He took them to a secure cave on the side of Weathertop and told them to stay put. He handed the hobbits small swords. "Take these," said Strider. "What about Harry?" asked Pippin. "I've got a spear," said Harry, holding it up. "I'll be fine." Take one anyway, said Strider, handing Harry a larger worn sword. Stay here until I come back, said Strider, and then he left. Keep out of sight. The hobbits passed their time by telling each other tales about some people named Bilbo, Thorin, Belin, Dwalin, Keely, Philly, Dory, Nori, Orioin, Glowin, Beaver, Bofer, and Bomber. Once or twice they mentioned Gandalf, but it was either fleetingly, or if he was the champion of that particular tale. A skin changer, asked Harry. The hobbits jumped slightly. He had remained silent all throughout the tale, telling, yeah, he can turn into anything he wants. He usually turns into a bear, though, said Sam excitedly. Sounds like animagus to me, said Harry thoughtfully. The day flitted past quickly, thanks to all the stories that the hobbits told. Both Frodo and Harry remained quiet and listened to the stories. Soon, Frodo slowly leaned against Harry's side and fell asleep. Thanks to the ring, Harry felt a sudden deep burning feeling come in from where Frodo was touching him. Harry didn't want to disturb him, so with the aid of his cloak, he moved Frodo and helped him to lay down. Keep your voices down, fellas. Frodo's resting, said Harry quietly. Oh, all right, said Sam quietly. As the dusk began to approach, even Harry began to nod off. Suddenly, the crackle of a fire woke him with a start. Frodo awoke as well. What are you doing? Hissed Harry. Toasting tomatoes and nice crispy bacon, said Merry with his mouth full. We saved some for the two of you, said Sam, extending a plate with another one being filled with the food. Put it out, you fools! Put it out, said Frodo, standing up and stamping on the fire with his curly-haired foot. Oh, that's nice, said Pippin. There's ashes in my tomatoes. Suddenly a shriek cried out into the night. They all stood at the edge and looked down. They saw 4 cloaked figures coming up the hillside towards Weathertop. Harry remembered those cloaked figures from the episode by the river. They needed to run. And they needed to run now. Run! Go! Shouted Harry as he shoved them towards the stairs. He followed the hobbits closely and didn't stop until they were at the center of Weathertop's summit. Despite the wind and the shrieks, a faint melody came upon the wind. It was the same melody as before when he found the opal. If that was the case, was there another stone like the opal in the close vicinity? Harry looked around curiously and saw a shimmering light coming from a small alcove and hurried over and saw, nestled amongst the stones, victims of decay, a small glittering amethyst jewel lying amongst the rubble. He picked it up and looked quickly around back to the hobbits. Fear splashed across their faces. He saw the hobbits huddled in the center of the open summit of Weathertop, turning apparently, looking around for their pursuers, cursing himself for being distracted. Harry hurried over to the hobbits, but suddenly a blade came out from behind a puller, thanks his hand in his pocket. Touching the opal in his pocket, Harry dodged the sword as the blade came swooping over his head. He dodged a blow from another Nazgul and hurried over to the hobbits. He stood in front of all of them. Get out of here, I'll hold them off, hissed Harry to the hobbits behind him. We want to help, said Merry. Don't argue, whispered Harry. Then he noticed something that froze his blood. Frodo had almost finished putting on the ring. No, cried Harry. But his yell fell on deaf ears, and it soon became deaf air. Suddenly, another sword came out of nowhere and sliced through the top of his spear, knocking off the point. He ducked down, but couldn't avoid the swift kick to his face. Harry got slammed into the nearby wall and landed hard onto the ground. He struggled to get back on his feet and watched in horror as one of the ringwraiths stabbed the empty air, but he knew that Frodo was there. A scream cut through the terror-filled area, and Harry staggered to his feet, bringing the sword that Strider gave him out. He swung at one of the Nazgul, but the sword was knocked out of his grasp. Strider came out of between 2 ruined pillars with a sword in one hand and a flaming torch in the other. Harry held to the ground and picked up his fallen staff and quickly touched it to Strider's torch, and it caused his to slowly begin to flame. It seemed that fire was the only thing that was going to work against them. His grip on a sword was too weak to think of using it against these Black Riders. While Strider slashed the Nazgul with his sword and ignited the cloaks of the riders, while Harry could only set fire to the riders in black, suddenly, the ringwraith that Harry was trying to battle knocked Harry's torch completely out of his hands. It clattered to the ground, landing in a puddle. It quickly extinguished itself and rendering it now useless. The Nazgul raised its sword and prepared to deliver a fatal blow to the teen. Harry absent-mindedly reached into his pocket and tightly gripped the amethyst stone Then, without warning, a flash of lightning came streaking down and struck the sword that was held high into the air. All the electricity in the bolt of lightning was sent through the ringwraith's form. The Nazgul flailed about and then fell to the ground. Harry looked at the shimmering purple stone in his hand and gripped it tighter. "Only one way to find out," said Harry quickly. He gripped the jewel tightly again and looked to a Nazgul over towards the other 3 hobbits. Another bolt of lightning came crashing down and struck the ringwraith and stopped it in its tracks and blasted him backwards and off the tower. The hobbits hurried over to Harry and they stayed beside him. But when they saw Frodo reappear, Sam hurried over to be beside him. Harry, Merry, and Pippin watched as the final ringwraith fall off the side of Weathertop with his face on fire. They all hurried over to Frodo's side. He was on the ground, gasping and crying out in pain. Strider bent over the injured hobbit and examined the blade that did the damage that crippled the small hobbit. "He's been stabbed by a Morgul blade. It's beyond my skill to heal. He needs elvish medicine," said Strider. "But it's 6 days to Rivendell. You'll never make it," said Sam fearfully. Harry looked worriedly at Frodo, who was draped over Strider's shoulder. Will he make it? Back at Grimmauld Place, Sirius sponged Harry's forehead and worried about Harry. What was going to happen? He just flew into the air twice and slammed himself against the wall without even a single warning. "Harry," said Sirius, sobbing uncontrollably as he cooled the unconscious lad's head. "For God's sake, wake up, please. Just wake up." In Grimmauld Place, Sirius, Remus, Dumbledore, and the rest of the Order stood around Harry's bed. Harry laid resting peacefully on the bed. He hadn't woken up at all since he had been struck down mysteriously in Hogwarts. He was still wounded and suffering from grievous wounds, but the peaceful countenance he had, there was no pain shooting through the boy's body. "Have you found out anything about what caused it?" Albus asked Moody, looking down at the young man, his hand tensing on the staff that he had in his hand. "Not exactly. Due to some extensive research and quite a few owls sent to the correct people, I've learned that other wizards and witches in history have had something like this similar happen to them," said Dumbledore, his face pale. He could tear his gaze away from the face of the young man. "How did people wake them up?" asked Remus. "Is there a cure?" "And a way to stop the bleeding," said Sirius, gently pouring a red potion down Harry's throat, being careful not to drown the unfortunate lad. Dumbledore looked towards the wall, his eyes misting. "No, they never found a way to wake them up. People just decided to put them out of their misery," his voice breaking. "What kind of people would do that?" said Tonks fretfully. "They were ministry officials," said Dumbledore. "They made the commanding decision, sometimes against the family's wishes." "Why would they? It's not their place," said Emmeline Vance, who was also in the room. "We do not know why they did it, but they did. And somehow, Umbridge found out that Potter's fallen prey to the same thing," said McGonagall, standing behind Dumbledore. "How I am unsure. She was never in the hospital wing. Severus never mentioned it, and no students other than the Weasleys and Granger know about him being this way." She wouldn't tell anyone," said Tonks. "Yes, she would, if it were to discredit Potter or to get him sent away," said McGonagall bitterly. "And killing him is the most efficient way of silencing him," said Moody darkly. Sirius looked over to Remus, his eyes wide with fear for his grandson. "You know, now I'm not so sure you aren't right about her." "I knew she was behind it," muttered Remus. "Unfortunately, we have no proof, but we are keeping an eye on her. Till she stumbles and makes a mistake, we can do nothing. But I have left strict orders that any detention with her is to be monitored by at least one of the ghosts, or an invisible house elf," said Dumbledore. "He's safe here, though, right?" asked Sirius, now holding Harry close to his chest, rocking him gently. "Yes, no one can get in here," said Dumbledore with a smile. "Harry's safe. But how will we wake him up?" asked Remus frantically. "I don't know, but I'm not going to give up," said Dumbledore. "Also, I need to talk to Mr. and Mrs. Weasley." "Why?" asked Sirius hotly. "I'm taking care of him. Don't worry, I'm not going to send you away from his side, but I just need to talk to them. They need to remove their children Hogwarts," said Dumbledore. "What? Why?" asked several of the Order members. With Umbridge knowing what had transpired with Harry, she could use certain means to finding Harry, said Dumbledore. "You mean torture?" said Kingsley. "Wouldn't put it past that old hag," said Moody. "Let's get the kids out of there now, and then ask the Weasleys to remove them later." "That's a good idea, Albus," said McGonagall. "I'll go and fetch the children." She hurried out of the room. Wow, it's not often she agrees with you, Moody, said Remia. Took me by surprise, said Moody. What's wrong, Kingsley? Asked Tonks. Kingsley was silent and was staring down at the youth with a questioning look. If Harry's been asleep for so long, how come he's not losing any weight? Asked Kingsley, staring intently at the unconscious figure. And how is he developing muscle tone? You're right, said Tonks. He looks like he's getting stronger, and he's getting just a bit taller since I've last seen him. Yeah, I noticed that too, but he's still asleep. I'm more worried about him not waking up, said Sirius. McGonagall hurried back to the castle and went straight to the teacher's lounge. In there was Snape, Sprout, Flitwick, and Hagrid, all enjoying a piping hot mug of tea and talking. Hagrid was telling Flitwick about some help he needed with some of the hedges that seemed to have developed a desire to move about the grounds and confuse some of the younger students. Snape was trying to bargain with Sprout for some of her more rare herbs to make a new potion he was developing. Thankfully, Umbridge was nowhere in sight. Oh, Minerva, how is Potter? Asked Flitwick. The same, but we need to get the Weasley children out of here, said McGonagall quickly. Why? What is wrong? Asked Sprout in shock. It's Dolores. Albus thinks she may interrogate them to find Potter, said McGonagall. Why would she care? Asked Snape. McGonagall told the other teachers what Dumbledore had discovered, and the suspicions that straightened up the other teachers quickly. Well, the twins are serving a detention with Madame Hooch, polishing the broom handles. They decided to set off fireworks in one of the boys' bathroom. Smith still has a burn on his, well, rear, said Professor Sprout. Miss Granger and Mr. Weasley would most likely be found in the library. They've been in there since the attack. They've been trying to find a way to wake Mr. Potter up, said Professor Flitwick sadly. I've been trying to assist them in any way I could. Ginny is the dorms, said Hagrid. Me and her were talking earlier, and I escorted her up here. I'll go and get Miss Weasley. Filius, would you go and get Miss Granger and Mr. Weasley? Pomona, said McGonagall. I'll go and get the twins from Madame Hooch. She'll understand. She's very fond of Potter, said Professor Sprout. Good, Severus. Albus would like you to make more blood-replenishing potions, said McGonagall hesitantly. Snape nodded. What about me? Asked Hagrid. Do you have any more of those tail hairs from the unicorns? We could use those to try and heal Harry's primary wounds by putting them in the bandages, said McGonagall. Also, have we gotten back on friendly terms with the centaurs? Their healing potions and herbs wouldn't hurt. Sorry, Professor, but Umbridge and the Minister ain't helping matters by insulting them every chance they get, said Hagrid sadly. Well, once all this clears up, then we can finally make amends with the centaurs. But right now, we need to get Potter back to the way he was, said McGonagall. Hermione and Ron were working tirelessly in the library, trying to find some way to wake Harry up. Damn, there's nothing. We've been looking in these books for days, and there's nothing, said Ron, slamming a book shut. We can't give up, Ron. We need Harry back, said Hermione, her eyes bloodshot from crying and lack of sleep. I know, but what can we do if Dumbledore hasn't been able to find anything out, said Ron. Don't you remember second year? He didn't know about the location of the Chamber of Secrets, and yet we found out, said Hermione. That's different. He was there the last time it was opened. But we don't have a single stinking clue what to do, said Ron hotly. Miss Granger, Mr. Weasley, where are you? Came the squeaky voice of Professor Flitwick. Over here, sir, said Ron. Come along quickly, said the Charms Professor in a hurried whisper. We need to get you and the other Weasleys out of here. Why, what's wrong? Asked Ron, putting the book down on a passing rolling trolley, enchanted to put the books away automatically. No time to explain. I've been dodging Umbridge all the way here. She must have some notion that we are here to fetch you. Here, we must use the secret passage. It's best to avoid her at all costs, said Professor Flitwick. He hurried over to the architectural section and pressed a small knothole on the bookshelf. Then the entire shelf swung forward, revealing a spiral staircase beneath it. Come along quickly, said Professor Flitwick. I've never known this secret passageway before, said Hermione. We teachers have our own secrets. Miss Granger, said Professor Flitwick with a smile. But quickly, there is no time to lose. I will escort you to the headmaster's office. Wait, Harry thinks, said Hermione. If she tries to go through them, we've already sent them on ahead, said Professor Flitwick. All that remains is getting you children out of here for your safety. Now come along. In no time, and through several different secret passageways they never knew existed, they found themselves up in Dumbledore's office. Fred, Ginny, and George were already waiting for them. McGonagall was just putting the finishing touches on a portkey. All right, gather around. We need to get you out of here as soon as possible, said Professor McGonagall. Why? What's the hurry? Asked Ron. It's Umbridge. We think she may want to interrogate you to find out where Potter's at, said Professor Sprout. But why would she care? Asked Fred. West tell you later. Come along now, said Professor McGonagall. Take a hold of this book and get going. It's for your safety. Are we going to where Harry is? Asked Ginny. That's right, said McGonagall, trying to beckon them forward. Then Professor Flitwick gave a loud squeak. She's coming, said Professor Flitwick worriedly. No more Dawal, came Dumbledore's uncharacteristically thunderous voice bouncing off the walls of the room. He wasn't present, but he was still no less in charge of the school. Take the port key. In a whirl of color, they were gone.
Harry, Strider, and the hobbits made their way as quickly as they could to Rivendell, but it was getting to be a bit of a hassle. Frodo kept feeling colder and colder, and they had to wrap Frodo up in everything they had. That is, until Harry figured out what small purple stone did.
He spoke to Strider quietly one night as they both tended to Frodo. I found another stone. Really? Said Strider as he looked down at it. Does this one do something? It seems to be able to control the weather, at least lightning anyhow, said Harry. Then Frodo groaned slightly and gasped. They turned towards him and wiped his brow and placed some Edvilis on the injury, and rewrapped the grievous wound. He's still getting colder, and we have no more blankets, said Strider. Let me try something, said Harry, giving the purple stone a little squeeze. Suddenly the night went from being cool to become pleasantly warm. Strider stood up and backed away in shock. Then he stopped. It's warmer all of a sudden, said Strider, looking around quickly. Yeah, I sort of raised the temperature a little bit. Don't know if it will help him, said Harry, sponging Frodo's head. Strider looked at the stone in Harry's hand warily. You seem to be depending a lot on those stones. You need to rely on your own strength and wisdom, not magic. Even Gandalf doesn't use magic unless he absolutely has to. But why not use them, said Harry, slightly irritated. Hadn't the stones helped him and hobbits? Back home, they used wits and magic to do their work. Physical strength, well, no one really used that, unless you count being able to withstand torture. In some situations, you won't be able to have time to use the stones. Your first instinct should be to defend yourself, get to secure enough place, then you can use magic, said Strider. Don't see you being able to use magic, muttered Harry darkly. Use them to find out the extent of their powers, but only use them in the direst of emergencies, said Strider wisely, choosing to ignore the impertinent mumbling of the young man. Harry crossed his arms and snarled, but then he sighed. Fine. You won't regret it, Harry, said Strider carefully, and you will find your fighting skills become even more improved by not using those. But the situation we're in is an emergency, though, said Harry. Strider thought quickly. This is true, so until we get to Rivendell, you can use the stones. But afterward, use them sparingly. Fine, said Harry, turning his head away. Strider smiled. Trust me, it's for the best. You'll find that magic cannot solve all problems. It helps, yes. But in the end, it's your wit that may change the fate of many. Harry and the rest of the small band made their way swiftly, deeper into the wild. But almost with each passing hour, Frodo was getting worse and worse. True, warming the air helped Frodo a little bit, but it still wasn't enough to keep him from feeling the creeping cold that seemed to creep from his shoulder and grip at his very soul. We need to hurry, we're running out of time, said Strider, trying to urge Bill to pony on. The unfortunate beast was not the prize of the herd, and certainly not worth half the money they paid Bill Ferny for it. But the beast still worked diligently to keep pace, thanks to Sam's coaxing. Just then, Harry had an inspired thought. Time. He reached into his small pouch and pulled out the tiny opal and tucked it into Frodo's feverish hands, trying hard to resist the electric shock that rang through his body. For a strange reason, he couldn't seem to touch the poor little thing without suffering damage to himself. Hold on to that until you get to Rivendell, said Harry in Frodo's ear. I can feel it, but I can't see it, said Frodo, looking down at his hands. His face turned from weariness to worry. Was he losing his sight or his mind? Yeah, well, no surprise there, said Harry quickly. Don't let go of what's there, whatever you do, said Harry earnestly. You have to trust me on this. With great resistance, he held Frodo's hands and coerced the stone to slow down time for the hobbit, not knowing if willing or commanding the stone would do it, but spending almost all his hope for this miracle. Immediately, Frodo noticed that the growing pain in his shoulder seemed to lessen and slow. Its throbbing and the coldness was even beginning to slow down. What? Said Frodo. Never mind, don't worry, just hold on to it. It'll help, said Harry reassuringly. They traveled for one more day, until Frodo couldn't stay in the saddle much longer, and they were still 2 days away from Rivendell. They needed a miracle. And unfortunately, Harry's opal and amethyst weren't of much more use, but Harry still tied a handkerchief around Frodo's hand to hold the opal in place. Strider and Sam had left to go and find some more of that healing herb, Kingsfoil, that seemed to have eased Frodo's suffering. Harry stayed behind with Frodo and the other hobbits, trying to reassure the hobbits that Strider was going to do all he could for Frodo. Is he gonna die? Asked Pippin worriedly. Not if Strider can help it. Shh. What was that? Asked Harry quickly. He turned to face the threatening darkness and picked up his brand new staff. He lost his first staff, but thanks to Strider, late one night while the hobbits were sleeping, they found a good stout branch, and Harry had managed to recover his metal spear tip before leaving Weathertop. He gripped his staff tightly and faced the sound of the approaching noise. Then he saw a horse and rider come through the thicket of trees. Then Strider and Sam came out from the woods behind them. It's all right, Harry, she's a friend, said Strider, coming up quickly, pushing the staff's metal tip down. She's the daughter of Elrond. Harry looked at the woman slowly, but kept his spear up slightly. Wise child, said the woman, coming into the firelight. Harry's mouth hung open dumbly. She was beautiful, the most beautiful woman he had ever seen. Even Flora would pale in comparison, and that was really saying something. She really is an elf, whispered Sam. This is an elf, thought Harry in amazement. I'll take her over Winky and Dobby any day of the week. Harry shook his head furiously and tried vainly to snap himself back to the tasks at hand. He managed to come back to the present at last, when the woman and Strider lifted Frodo up off the ground. They carried Frodo to the horse, but neither one of them got on. They stood there talking in soft voices and in some strange language. Finally he heard Strider say, "Ride hard and don't look back." The beautiful woman commanded the horse in that same strange foreign language and took off. Sam was not happy. "What are you doing?" he shouted. "Those wraiths are still out there." Harry looked at Strider and noticed that he had a flash of worry on his face. If Frodo can get to this Rivendell place any faster, then it's all for the better. She was riding pretty quick. "What do we do now, Strider? Do we follow them tonight and tomorrow?" asked Harry. "If I were confident about how rested the hobbits were, we'd leave right now. But we'd best spend the night here," said Strider. "What about Mr. Frodo?" said Sam. Merry and Pippin both looked fearfully up at Strider and Harry. "He's safe with Arwen," said Strider. "Oh, is that her name?" said Harry with a smile. Strider raised his eyebrows, and Harry noticed the sides of his mouth twitch. "I would presume to try, if I were you," said Strider with a smirk. "She's way too good for me," said Harry, throwing his hands up into the air. "And she's older than the both of us put together," said Strider. "Huh?" said Harry in shock. "Really?" "Oi!" shouted Sam. Harry and Strider turned and looked at the hobbits, who were strapping on their packs and putting out the fire. "We want to go and be with Mr. Frodo," said Sam sternly, helping Merry and Pippin stand. "Sorry, Sam," said Harry, grabbing his own knapsack. "We're leaving." "Are you sure you can go on tonight?" said Strider. "Are completely sure you are rested enough?" "We will, whether we can or not," said Merry. "Stalwart answer. Come on, then," said Strider with a small smile, and led them off into the direction that Arwen had taken Frodo. They traveled all night and on to the next day, barely stopping for food, but choosing to eat on the way. If Strider had seen a fruit-bearing tree or a bush full of plump, ripe berries, he would quicken his pace and gather up the provisions, and then when the hobbits and Harry came to them, he would hand them out and continue on walking. Since the loss of Hobbit to their party, Strider made a revision of his advice about the stones. He wanted Harry to not use them until they had reached Rivendell, so that Gandalf could give his counsel on them. Provided if Gandalf was there, Strider decided to teach Harry swordplay during the evening hours, when the hobbits were asleep, clasped on their bedrolls and slumbering deep. Harry was eager to learn, but he discovered very quickly that he wouldn't be left with bruises like fighting with his staff. Strider treated a long cut on Harry's leg. "You're getting better, but you need to move your feet. Don't just stand there." "Bad way to learn that," chuckled Harry. Soon Harry's leg was wrapped up and he was fast asleep, leaving Strider to sit and think. He didn't trust those stones that Harry was finding, but something stirred deep inside him, telling him that they were all right and perfectly safe, but he was still unsure. And being distrustful towards strange objects is what keeps folks alive in the world. As they traveled onward the next day, Harry heard music again. Was it another stone so soon? Compared to the alternative, he would greatly prefer it. He followed the sound, looking around quickly, and there it was, a part of the worst alternative. The small opal, glittering amongst the washed-ashore river rocks. "Strider!" shouted Harry loudly. Strider came up to him and looked at the small jewel in his hand. "Is it the same one?" asked Strider, peering into the youth's hand, looking up and down the river, peering for any signs. "It is. He must have dropped it. I hope he made it to Rivendell." "All right," said Harry, standing up. The tracks lead from the other side of the river towards Rivendell, only one set of hoofprints, so they eluded the riders at any rate. "It's only a few more hours' walk from here. Come on. The sooner we get there, the sooner we'll find out if you made it safely and without further trouble," said Strider. They forged the river that lay before them. Harry and Strider had to carry the hobbits over to the other side, for they almost got swept downstream. Then they continued on. Strider and Harry were now more concerned than they had before, and hurried onwards, leaving the hobbits to run at full speed behind them. Soon they stood on top of a large cliff, and they looked down into the valley. "Rivendell, the hidden valley of the elves," said Strider. Harry looked down at the peaceful valley, and a bright smile stretched across his face. He could see waterfalls, large, beautiful buildings, lovely, full trees, and a smell of wildflowers wafted up to his nose. He could see himself growing old in this valley, and could see himself loving every minute of it. Soft and peaceful, it was here. Sam was fidgeting, wanting to stay and look at the view from the ridgy top, but wanting to go down and be with his Mr. Frodo. "Don't worry, Sam, I'm sure he's fine," said Harry. With great effort, he put confidence in his voice. They made their way slowly down into the valley, barely stopping to enjoy the scenery any further than they already had. They continued, going swiftly up to the house, Sam almost breaking into a run, but someone all of a sudden stepped out from behind a tree. "Halt!" said the man, holding up a bow and arrow. The latter pointed straight at Harry's head. "Peace, friend," said Strider, holding up his hand, not choosing to speak in Elvish to ease the hobbits and his young friend. "Ah, Aragorn. Apologies, we've had strange creatures and folk coming near our borders, and the guard has been intensified. It is strange company that you keep this visit," said the elf with a smile down to the hobbits. "I'm trying to escort them to Elrond. I would have had Gandalf in our company, but," said Strider, "do not fear, we know what befell him. He's here, and anxious to see you and the small ones. But he didn't warn us about your companion here," said the elf, nodding towards Harry. "We met him in Bree," said Pippin. "The same as Strider." "Is he trustworthy?" asked the elf, looking at Harry closely. Harry took a step back as the elf invaded his personal space. "Send him through, and we'll see. If he's evil, he'll be flung into the river like the others that try and invade Rivendell," said Strider with a smile. "Thank goodness I'm on your side," said Harry with a nervous smile, as he looked down off the bridge and into the raging waters beneath. The small company made their way further down the path and came upon the gate of Rivendell, and there to greet them was Arwen, not in the practical garb she did wear, but dressed in a flowing white gown. She stood beside someone who had shared some of her features, standing beside her, and then an old man dressed all in gray, standing on the other side of the man beside Arwen. "Harry, this is Gandalf the Grey," said Strider with a smile to the old man, "and Lord Elrond." "You look just like Dumbledore," said Harry, staring at Gandalf with his long white beard and bushy eyebrows. "Who's that?" asked Gandalf, narrowing his eyes slowly. "Never mind, but that really doesn't bode well for me to get home," said Harry. "Do you live far away?" asked Gandalf, looking curiously at the youth. "You have no idea," said Harry with a grim smile. Harry couldn't believe it. He had finally gotten to meet Gandalf, and it was quite a shock when he saw that he had resembled his own mentor, Dumbledore. "Reminds me of that show Mrs. Figg loved, The Twilight Zone," thought Harry. "Where's Mr. Frodo?" asked Sam, quickly. Harry jolted back to reality, or at least the closest thing he could get to reality. "He is inside. He will be all right, Sam," said Gandalf, smiling slightly down to Sam and patting his shoulder. "Lord Elrond is healing him quite well." "How can he, if he's right there?" asked Pippin, nodding towards Elrond. "Show respect, Peregrine Took," said Gandalf, raising his staff slightly. "I've done all I can for now, but I must get back soon to change the dressing on his shoulder," said Elrond with an amused smile. "Why didn't you meet us at Bree, Gandalf?" asked Merry, trying to save his cousin from getting a swift smack in the head by Gandalf's staff. "I was unable to meet you due to a expected delay," said Gandalf gently, despite the fact he was trying to tap the top of Pippin's head sharply, but the hobbit wasn't standing still. "But I am here now." "Thanks goodness for that," said Strider, unloading his sword and pack. Amen, said Harry with a smile. Elrond and Gandalf looked at the youth in confusion and then each other. I'm tired. I can't wait to sit down, said Pippin, sinking to the floor, exhausted by both the traveling and dodging Gandalf's staff. You don't like to focus on one thing too long, do you? Said Harry with a smile as he leaned on his spear. He never does, said Sam, rolling his eyes. He flits around like a hummingbird. Come along, then. I'll take you to your comrade, said Elrond with a smile to the weary travelers. They followed him in silence, the hobbits and Harry looking side to side eagerly as they took in the beauty and the majesty of Rivendell to where Frodo was resting. When they arrived at Frodo's room and saw him lying on the bed, Harry wouldn't have called it resting. Frodo had sweat pouring off his temple, and his breathing was far from steady. His hands were clenched onto the bed clothes, and he was writhing under the thick blankets. Harry had to flinch when he saw him. It was a good thing that he got here in time. Another few hours he would have been lost, said Gandalf somberly. Harry looked at him quickly. Had the opal helped, or did it not make any difference? What's wrong with him? Asked Pippin faintly. The point of that Nazgul's sword is making its way into his heart, said Arwen, helping her father lift the dressings on Frodo's wounds. But with the aid of my father, he is beginning to mend. It won't be long until he is well again. Thank goodness, said Harry. Suddenly, a low growl came from the three hobbits, and Harry laughed. I was waiting for that, said Strider with a smile, not stopping for lunch and meager meals along the way. I'm surprised it hadn't happened sooner. We didn't want to stop, said Sam shortly. Speak for yourself. I was getting a mite hungry, said Pippin. I threw you 2 apples, said Strider with a roll of his eyes. The second one bounced off his head and landed in a stream. He couldn't catch it, said Harry with a laugh. I can fix that growling stomach. He looked over to Arwen. Where's your kitchens? I'll go make them some food. You cook? Asked Elrond with an amused smile. You appear to be more of a young warrior in training than a cook. Man of few talents, said Harry with a smirk. Arwen laughed softly. I will show you the way. After Harry had left, although not before Strider sent him a pointed look, and Harry nodded with earnest, Elrond turned toward Strider. Strange youth. Strange, yes, but he's very endearing, said Strider with a fond smile. How far away is his country? Said Gandalf. I don't recollect seeing a youth like him before, and if he needs my help in getting home, nowhere in Middle-earth, or in the surrounding lands, said Strider. How did he get here? Asked Elrond, frowning slightly. He does not know. He just remembers getting knocked out after he had supper and he ended up in what sounds like the Shire, said Strider. I had to fish him out of the river as I patrolled those lands. Did he give you any clues? Perhaps it is a land that we elves have heard of, said Elrond. He mentioned a city called London, said Strider. Well, Elrond, said Gandalf. The name meant nothing to him, and did not stir any memory he could recall. I have heard of a place called that, but it was quite a long time ago, said Elrond. He told me of it. He looked at Gandalf. Gandalf looked away, his eyes misting slightly. Meanwhile, Harry had followed Arwen down into back of Elrond's house and walked into a wide and open room. This is some kitchen, said Harry in an odd whisper. We have venison over there and vegetables and fruits over there, said Arwen, gesturing around the room. If you need something, Willito, our cook will help you. An elven lady with snow-white hair turned and smiled at Harry. Thanks, said Harry with a bright smile to the both of them. He turned and walked towards one of the smaller pieces of venison hanging above his head. No, I'd best use this bigger piece. Strider might be hungry as well, thought Harry. May I have this? Said Harry. Of course you may use whatever you wish, said Willito with a smile as she continued to pluck the grapes off the stems. He took the medium-sized piece of meat down and began to carve it up. Now to come up with something, with all this stuff. Some time later, Sam, Merry, and Pippin were sitting beside Frodo's bedside, while Strider, Elrond, Gandalf discussed about Harry's strange homeland and the mysterious jewels that he possessed. I don't trust them, said Strider. They don't seem natural. They are as natural as the air we breathe, said Gandalf. If they are what I think they are, I think so as well, said Elrond, nodding. What do you mean? Asked Strider. Elrond and Gandalf looked between each other and then back to the Ranger. They were once owned by the great King Mandembor, an ancient, powerful wizard, said Elrond. Then how did Harry get them? Asked Sam. He didn't mention any other wizard but Gandalf. I'd like to know that too, said Harry, coming into the room with a large tray. That didn't take you long, said Pippin, standing up quickly and taking a plate, his face breaking into a wide smile. Working at the Prancing Pony helped with that little skill, said Harry, handing Sam and Mary their plates. You hungry, Strider? I've got you a plate. What did you make? Asked Strider. Venison with, blackberry wine sauce, said Harry, looking insistently at Elrond. Weathertop helped me find your wine cellar, and she pointed out the least favorited wine. Very good, said Elrond, though you are welcome to whatever we have here. I didn't want to push it, said Harry with a smile. Push what? Asked Elrond. The barrels? I would be amazed if you could. Yes, this is delicious, said Pippin, shoveling the food into his mouth. Elrond looked at the young hobbits as they ate with fervor. He looked at Strider, who also was putting a fork to his mouth. He's right, said Strider, with his eyes shut and a smile on his face. Elrond looked at the plates in disbelief. He looked at Strider. Might I? Here, take mine, said Harry, holding his plate up to Elrond. Elrond shifted the 3 juicy blackberries off to one side and placed a forkful of venison in his mouth. He usually only ate venison if his guests were omnivorous, and at dinner, but he did want to try this young man's cooking. His mouth was ablaze with the succulent flavor of juicy blackberries and the sweet taste of wine dancing with the venison. How old are you? Said Elrond, looking at Harry intently. I'm still 15, said Harry. I still can't believe you can cook the way you do at your age, said Strider, taking a bite of his own venison. Had to learn really young, said Harry. Might I see those jewels that you have acquired? Asked Gandalf as he took a bite of the venison on Strider's plate. If you don't mind. Sure, here you go, said Harry. He placed both jewels in Gandalf's hand. Gandalf inspected them carefully, holding them up to the light. They are his, said Elrond. Are you sure? Asked Strider. I cannot see them. That is proof in itself, said Elrond. Those jewels can only be seen by either a wizard or king. I'm not a king of elves, so I cannot see them. So how come Strider can see them? Asked Mary. We will tell you at another time, said Gandalf, absently. So are they safe to use? Asked Harry. Strider doesn't trust them very much. Very safe, said Gandalf, but guard them carefully. I know of 2 people who would dearly love to possess them all. Saruman and Sauron. I wouldn't spend time to wonder, said Strider. Precisely. If either of them find out that they've been found, they won't rest till that of both the ring and the jewels, said Gandalf. I'm sort of regretting using the amethyst on those Nazgul things now, but how come they didn't go and find the opal Frodo had? All they would have to do is follow the music, said Harry. What music? Asked Strider. The music they play when I put them somewhere beside the pouch on my hip, said Harry. I didn't want to tell you, just in case, didn't want you thinking I was mad. Elrond and Gandalf looked at each other swiftly, but then turned back to Harry. We may have just arrived at a way for you to get home, but it will be quite challenging, said Elrond. My life is just one casual stroll after another, said Harry, shaking his head. What's the point in having a boring life, I suppose? What do I have to do? I would advise you to find the other 11 stones that are scattered about, said Elrond, by bringing the jewels of the Great Mandamore out of hiding and then bringing them back here. Why bring them back here? Asked Harry. I will show you, said Elrond. Aragorn, you'd best follow as well. It might help you in the future. One may never know. Uncertainly, Harry and Strider followed Elrond and Gandalf out of the room and outside into the bright sunshine. This way, said Elrond, leading the 3 men off into the eastern side of the Elven Valley. Soon they found themselves beside a gentle stream traveling down the side of the large hill, and a large open, what looked like to Harry, a gazebo. Elrond stopped short and ushered the 2 younger men onward. Go, said Elrond, and pay your respects. Harry moved forward slowly and saw that there was a cherry wood coffin with a crystal clear cover over it, serving as a see-through lid. Inside, he saw what seemed to be a man sleeping peacefully underneath it. He was a tall man, wearing a flowing gold cloak with red ornate embroidery. He had a short blonde beard and curly hair hiding beneath a golden crown upon his hair. Strange thing is, there was no jewels in his crown, but quite a few holes could be seen. Harry felt something stir in his mind, as well as his heart. What was this feeling? And his head felt slightly heavy. That is King Me Andambor, said Elrond. He was my mentor a very long time ago, one of the best teachers I had ever had. He taught me, with great power comes great temptation, and I must resist its alluring offers, said Gandalf. a tear trickling down his nose. He also taught me that while I may hold fears, I must also face them. This is his final resting place, though he would have wanted to have been buried in his own kingdom, but that was not possible, said Elrond. Why not? Asked Harry. His kingdom is now known as Mordor, said Gandalf sadly. Alas, it is not the lush paradise it once was. His murderers destroyed it. Harry looked down at old and beloved king. Something didn't make sense. He looks like he's only been gone for a few days. Elrond gave a dry chuckle. The clear substance that separates us from him is diamond. Our final present to him was do give him a peaceful rest. The dwarves molded the coffin, and Gandalf enchanted the casket so that time would not stake its claim on him. Harry's eyes rested on the crown and the different shaped holes around the base of it. Do I put the jewels inside now? No, keep them. You may need them. But when you find all 13, bring them here, if you are able. That way, he will be whole again, said Elrond. He loved them, did he? Asked Harry. But how does bringing the jewels here help me get back home? There is one jewel. It is said that when it comes in contact with the others, it will grant the wish of whomever owns them. It should be able to get you home. And I'll just bet it'll be the last one I find, said Harry, rolling his eyes while he pulled out the small jewels in his hand and looked at them. What have I got to lose? I sure ain't coming up with a way home. Good lad, said Gandalf with a smile. If he was so powerful, how did someone kill him? Asked Harry. I am not sure how they managed it, but I can remember that terrible day. But alas, it's a long tale, especially as I would rather you know more about him. Let's have a seat, said Gandalf. They walked over to another gazebo and sat down on the cool stone benches. Gandalf took out his long pipe and lit it with the tip of his staff. I gotta get me one of those, thought Harry looking at the staff. That would make this whole adventure so much easier. Well, it was a long time ago, even farther back in time than the last alliance, and long before the Dark Lord Sauron forged the One Ring, the land of Mordor never used to look like the poisonous and forbidding realm it is, said Gandalf, thinking deeply. It used to be as lush and green as this country, he said, looking around Rivendell. He had ruled over the entire Middle-earth for many centuries, giving aid to the Ents and the Entwives. The what? Said Harry with a raised brow. Tree herders, said Strider quickly. How can you herd a tree? Thought Harry, shaking his head. It's not like the sheep or something like that. Gandalf continued. When the men had a problem with land dispersion, or who owned what, found sheep, or the dwarves who couldn't ever seem to fix on a price on their toys and armor, they would see the king. The elves wouldn't require help for the most part, but he would give it when and if they needed it. He'd stay busy convincing dragons to stay in their mountains and not venturing far from their homes, keeping the goblins in their caves and offering travelers a safer route to take on their journeys. How did he do that? Asked Harry. He made pathways and placed an enchantment on them in order to keep them protected, said Elrond. Since his death, the paths have become overrun with thorns that seem to regrow the moment you cut them, or avalanches that seem endless. But while me Andembor was alive, all of Middle-earth was at peace. Lands prospered and families flourished. Even the goblins were beginning to become sociable, and that in itself told everyone that it was a time of great peace. He was a great mentor to the wizards and a ruler. His power and kindness knew no bounds, and he was dearly loved by his subjects. But what about the kings of Gondor and Rohan? Asked Strider. There were none. There was, at the very most, mayors and village leaders, and that was enough. I don't remember reading about this in any of the old books, said Strider, looking confused. No, I don't believe you ever would have, for when Sauron and his Dark Master killed the king, they removed any traces of him. Except for what people remember, the jewels and his body, there was nothing left of him. No fond memories of the peace we enjoyed, or the desire to set things back to the way they were, said Elrond. Would you want to? Asked Strider. Now there are rulers of men. It would be almost impossible to go back to the older days, but the peace of mind, knowing you didn't have to train in the arts of war, was a pleasant feeling, said Elrond. How did Sauron and whoever get the drop on him? Asked Harry. Get the what? Asked Gandalf. How did they take me and Denbor off guard? Said Harry, correcting himself. Gandalf sighed. It was his birthday. He was going to be 3,524 that day. The Pelennor fields were bustling with brightly colored tents, banners, and tables full of food and presents that seemed to stretch out for miles. No matter how humble, everyone was invited, said Gandalf. I remember that day so well. I was getting my fireworks organized, all were his favorites, when people began to wonder. Wonder about what? Asked Strider. Why King Ming? Ninbor hadn't arrived at the party, said Gandalf. Normally, he would have arrived by that time and greeting all the partygoers. People were volunteering to go and escort the king to the festivities. But suddenly, then came a great noise over near where the king's palace was. Suddenly, a bright flash of light erupted over the sky, and then it split up into multiple beams of light shooting off into different directions. The jewels, said Strider. Correct, said Elrond. I thought they were lost forever. He must have used the last of his strength to keep those jewels away from them, from falling into the wrong hands. But if you could possibly find them, then perhaps... Aside from getting me home, what will happen? Asked Harry. You might make the coming battles a mite easier, said Gandalf. Coming battles, said Harry, staring at Gandalf hard. You will be told soon enough, said Gandalf. Though it is not your fight, you don't need to lend us your aid. If you don't wish it. Harry stood up and walked out of the gazebo and looked up at the sky. What's wrong, Harry? Asked Strider. Back home, I was already what felt like the center part of a war. Now I'm going to be fighting in another on top of the one that haunts my dreams, said Harry. Gandalf and Elrond looked between each other uneasily. Harry then turned around and had a manic smile on his face. Where do I sign up? After what you said, you want to fight? Asked Strider in shock. My whole life is filled with pain, danger, and worry. Why start living a peaceful life now? Said Harry with a laugh. And besides, how would I get home? You could always live here, and after the danger is past, then you can start your quest to find them, said Elrond. Being so young, it may be best that you stay. But you said that if Saruman or Sauron were to find these, he held out the small stones, then we'd be in trouble. If I keep on traveling and going about the countryside, it would be harder for him to catch up with me, as opposed to sitting in one place, said Harry with a smile. Gandalf looked thoughtful. That would be a safe choice. You would not be able to hold off the hordes of Mordor when Sauron learns that the stones are here, he said, looking at Elrond.
I hope you aren't leaving now,
said Elrond, standing up and looking at the boy. We must discuss things further. He's staying here until we get a plan in motion, said Strider quickly. Best not go off in a hurry. You don't even know where to start. Exactly. You'd best stay here for the time being, said Gandalf. Sirius sat beside Harry's bed as usual, watching him closely. It was only when Remus came around that he would allow himself to rest, and that would be in the bed next to him. Ron was happily in Sirius's old room. His first night in there, they found Ron gaping at the different bikini-clad girls. Bill had to cover the pictures in order for Ron to even attempt to get some sleep. Remus sat in the chair on the other side of Harry's bed, reading from a book on unusual curses, hoping to find something that might help Harry. The Weasley children and Hermione had both spent the day talking to each other in hushed voices and looking grave. Finally, Sirius had had enough and sent them from the room. It's depressing enough in here. I don't need you adding to it, shouted Sirius. You shouldn't have shouted at them, said Remus, looking up at him as he slammed the door at the children's backs. I was getting tired of it, especially Hermione. She just won't shut up, said Sirius shortly. She's only trying to help, said Remus. Though I will admit she needs to lay off the counter curses. She seems to think that we haven't tried almost everything. She's getting close to having her mouth spellotaped, said Sirius. Do you want me to keep watch tonight? You should get some rest, said Remus. No, I'm fine. You better get some sleep. I'll be fine, said Sirius. If you sure need anything, just sing out, said Remus, closing his book. Sirius sat in the candlelit room and watched Harry's chest rise and fall as he breathed. Like every night, for over 2 weeks, he silently prayed for Harry to wake up. Sirius's eyes began to droop slightly. Then he heard a sort of tinkling chime coming from out of nowhere. What is that? Said Sirius, looking around quickly. Then a bright flash came from the foot of Harry's bed, slowly climbing up to Harry's head. Sirius looked quickly and saw something extremely odd once the light was gone. Harry? Why do you have a crown? Asked Sirius in a whisper. Soon, Dumbledore and Remus came rushing into the room. What was that? Asked Romidus. Look, on Harry's head, said Sirius. I'm not too sure where that thing came from. Dumbledore, said Remus. What is that? Dumbledore looked at the crown and his face paled. It can't be, it's impossible, said Dumbledore weakly. What is it? Asked Sirius. I've seen that crown before, but, said Dumbledore, I haven't seen it in so long. Harry spent his days wandering aimlessly between the libraries of Rivendell, the paths in that peaceful valley, and the kitchens. In the kitchens, he had experimented and created several different treats and dishes, all of which Merry and Pippin were happy to taste test for him. They kept popping into the kitchen, and if they weren't busy nicking food from Elrond's normal cook, they were sneaking some of the food he was cooking. Quick, before he looks, whispered Pippin as Merry snatched up some candied chestnuts. Why not just take the bowl? Asked Harry from where he was busy cutting vegetables and sliding them into a large pot and stirring its contents. Both of the hobbits froze in place, looked at each other, grabbed the bowl full of chestnuts, and ran swiftly out of the room. They seem to love your food, said Willowdale with a smile. I think they take mine only because they know you'd take after them, said Harry with a laugh. Only if they took Lord Elrond's food like last time, said Willowdale with a laugh. I think young Peregrine Took is just getting back to sitting down again. When Harry wasn't cooking, another pastime he enjoyed was exploring the valley. He was now staying in. He'd lay on the banks of the slow-moving river and slept peacefully until night would fall, or until Strider came out to fetch him. But, for the most part, wherever his paths in Rivendell took him, he'd always find himself wandering over to where King Manenbor rested. He'd sit with his back to the rest of the valley and just meditate on the casket and its owner. I'm not too sure I can do this, said Harry, looking down at the body of the king. How am I supposed to find those jewels when they could be anywhere? That is why you need this, said a deep voice. Harry started and glanced around nervously. He didn't think anyone else was following him. He looked around but couldn't find the owner of the voice. But he looked back at the casket and saw a small compass lying on the top of the diamond cover. What's this? Said Harry. But the voice didn't return. Harry looked at the small compass. At least it looked like one. It had a needle like a compass, but there was no north, south, east, or west directions on it. On the crystal face, it had what looked like a rising or setting sun etched into it. He turned it over slowly and saw a small golden inscription. To find my power in the helping hour. Take heart and follow the course, and make everlasting power yours. Harry looked at the compass and the inscription with an uncertain look. How can this thing help me? Asked Harry out loud. He took the compass with him as he left the gazebo and headed back into Elrond's house. He made his way swiftly to the Elven library and took out the books that Elrond had written about the king and his jewels. He looked in every book Elrond had, but he couldn't find anything that sounded like the compass that now laid in his hand. Should he trust it? His mind told him he would be a fool to do so, but his heart told him to go with it. What could it hurt? And besides, I'll ask Gandalf about it at dinner. That reminds me, I need to make something special for the occasion, said Harry to himself. For indeed, it was a special occasion. Not only had Frodo finally woken up and was healed almost completely, it was told that several representatives of the different races of Middle-earth were going to arrive, and soon they would discuss the fate of the ring that Frodo bore to Rivendell. While Willowdale made different dishes that appealed to elves, men, and dwarves, Elrond had come to Harry earlier in the day, while Harry was dipping his toes in the gently flowing water. Would you care to make a dish from your own country? Said Elrond with a smile. I'm not too sure if I can, said Harry, scratching the back of his head. Some of the ingredients I would need might not be that readily available. Like what, for example? Said Elrond. Garlic? Said Harry. I believe we have that in our gardens. It is a good healing bulb, said Elrond. Willowdale uses it sometimes for seasonings in her food, but not all that often. Oregano? Said Harry. We have that as well, said Elrond. Anything else? Guess not. I know. You have the rest. It'll take me a while to remember how to do it and how to make it from absolute scratch. He headed down into kitchens after he pocketed the small compass. He walked into the kitchens, greeted Willowdale, and wrapped an apron around his middle. He grabbed the ingredients he would need and began to make what he had intended to make. As the representatives arrived, a faint smell came from the northern part of Elrond's house, and it tickled their noses. Greeting, Legolas. I hope you had a safe and peaceful journey, said Elrond with a smile. It was pleasant enough. What is that aroma on the winds? Said Legolas as he looked around, trying to discover the origin of the smell. A visitor staying here is making a dish from his own land. What is your opinion thus far? Asked Elrond. It is different, I cannot wait to see what it actually looks like, said Legolas. Then he unsaddled his horse and strode proudly into the great hall. A few hours later, a small band of short yet stout bearded men came marching up to Elrond's steps. Elrond was already outside, seeing them coming down the small path along the cliffside. "Ah, Master Elrond, we've arrived at last," said one of the older-looking men. "Greetings, Master Dwarf," said Elrond kindly. "How was the journey?" "It was long, but not uneventful," said one of the younger dwarves. "Had a run-in with a few goblins who tried to ambush us." "Are you injured?" asked Elrond with concern as he looked at each of the dwarves before him. "No, we are fine. Our injuries were shallow and mere bruises," said one of the dwarves. "But I fear the goblins might have a few mortal wounds back where they lay," he added with a chuckle. "Well, at the very least, please rest until the day after tomorrow. We will hold council. Then, tonight, we will have a feast to welcome you all to Rivendell," said Elrond. "Sounds good," said one of the dwarves gruffly. They stomped heavily on the steps into Elrond's house. Elrond turned to follow the dwarves inside when he heard a galloping of hoofs coming towards him. "It seems all the guests are arriving in the same day. Very good." He saw a strong-looking man come riding up to him, a shield upon his back, with a sword and horn on either side. He climbed off his horse and opened his mouth to speak, but Elrond cut him off. "Boromir, son of Denethor, I believe," said Elrond. "Yes, Lord Elrond," said Boromir, his eyes showing slight surprise. "Welcome to Rivendell. Your horse will be well cared for. Please rest here. We will hold council the day after next," said Elrond gallantly. "Thank you," he said, trying to sound humble, and followed Elrond inside the Great Hall. Merry and Pippin made their daily raid on the kitchen when they saw what Harry was cutting up on a wooden cutting board. "What is that, Harry?" said Merry, putting his nose close to the large circle of bread, red paste, and cheese. "It's called a pizza back, where I come from. I just hope it turned out okay," said Harry as he lifted a slice up to mouth and bit into it. He chewed slowly. It could use a bit more garlic in the crust. What do you think?" said Harry, slicing up another 2 thin pieces and handed them to the 2 small hobbits. The 2 hobbits looked at the thin slices and gingerly smelled them, looked at each other, and then took a small bite. "What do you think?" repeated Harry. He was answered when the 2 of them picked up the entire slice and ate them greedily. "I take it. It's fine," said Harry with a smile. "I'll just add some of this to the next batch." He took a small green herb and began to dice it up. Once Merry and Pippin had finished eating the rest of it, he handed them a sprig of the herb to each of them. "Take it and chew it. It's parsley. It will counteract the garlic," said Harry with a smile. "Trust me, people will thank you for it, if they've ever had garlic before." Later on that evening, Harry walked into what the elves called a party, but it wasn't anything like the parties he had been to at Hogwarts. The music was slow, he could hear 3 different songs going on, and they didn't have much to do with each other. People were telling stories about wars and dragon plunders on one end of the room, and the other end people were eating and drinking wine. "Hello, Harry," said a voice coming from his left. Harry turned and saw Strider walking arm in arm with Arwen. "Hey, Strider," said Harry happily. "Lady Arwen," he said with a bow to Arwen. "Merry and Pippin brought out your dish, though, after they got after it with the help of Sam and somewhat Frodo, there wasn't much left," said Arwen with a laugh. "I took some, as did Elrond. It was delicious," said Strider with a smile. "I've never had something like that before." "I'm glad I added the extra parsley," thought Harry as he smelled Strider's breath and did not detect any garlic. "Have you seen Gandalf or Elrond? I wanted to ask them about something," said Harry, looking around. "They are over there, but you may want to wait. They seem to wish privacy," said Arwen, pointing slowly over to a secluded corner. "All right," said Harry, nodding. Harry walked slowly around the room and took in the different assortment of people. He was introduced by Strider and Arwen to different people. Legolas of Mirkwood, who seemed unable to remove his gaze from Harry's eyes. To Boromir, who merely sniffed in disgust when Strider spoke his name. Then finally Gimli, who shook Harry's hand warmly and told him that he found Harry's pizza good, but a little flat and without meat. "A dwarf needs red meat in order to keep up one's strength," he said proudly. "I'll keep that in mind if I cook for you again, Mr. Gimli," said Harry with a smile. "Harry!" shouted Pippin. "Come here. We want to introduce you to somebody." He then began to drag Harry off to one of the circles where stories were being told. "Legolas, why we're staring at him?" asked Strider as he grabbed Legolas's elbow. His eyes, they look like the leaves of Mirkwood, said Legolas to Strider. Is he a half-elf?
No, he is of the race of men, said Arwen.
A shame he'd have made a fine husband for my sister, said Legolas. Arwen and Strider looked at him. My father will not allow anyone but an elf to marry my sister, said Legolas quickly. He is fair enough, and she enjoys a graceful meal. I hope she finds her true love, said Arwen with a smile. No matter what race they are. What demeanor does he possess? Asked Legolas. He is different, said Strider. You'll like him. The night went on, and Harry had been introduced to several different people that were staying in Rivendell. Elrond, Strider, and Arwen introduced him to the different dwarves and elves, while the hobbits introduced him to Bilbo Baggins. Hey Bilbo, this is the person we told you about, said Merry. Ah, so you are the young man that they had met in Bree, said Bilbo, taking Harry by the hand and shaking it warmly. Yes, sir, said Harry with a smile. Glad to make your acquaintance, said Bilbo. Imagine all this fuss over a simple bauble. From what I've been told about it, it's far from simple, said Harry. Harry looked over and saw Gandalf and Elrond come out from their secluded corner. Excuse me? He made his way slowly over to where Gandalf and Elrond were. I've got a question. Yes, lad, said Elrond with a smile. Do you have any idea what this is? He asked and handed Elrond. Elrond took it in his hand and examined it carefully. It has the king's sign on the crystal face, said Elrond. I've never seen it before. Where did you find it? Asked Gandalf. Harry told them how he discovered it. Elrond looked at the compass thoughtfully. I'm not sure what to say to you, but I recognize the symbol, so it was a possession of King Minenbor. Though how it came to just appear, it is not something I've heard of before, said Gandalf slowly. At least not nothing in this part of the world. But what purpose it serves, according to the back of this, it has something to do with the jewels. Perhaps it will lead you better than the music will, said Elrond. I hope so. I don't want to have to strain my ears to listen for it, said Harry with a smile. Harry, said Merry, running up to him. Come on, we told Bilbo you could sing, and he wants to hear you. Then you can tell a story, said Pippin. Seriously, you don't want me singing again, said Harry, trying to pull out of both of their grasps. Don't be silly. Come on, said Pippin. You'll want to hear this, said Strider, walking up to Elrond and Gandalf. It shocked me when I heard it the first time. What is the song called? Asked Bilbo. Well, trust me, it's one you don't know, said Harry, shaking his head. But it's called Can You Feel the Love Tonight? Then sing, said Pippin. Harry sighed, but began to sing. Everyone else that had been either listening to another story or song or doing the actual storytelling or singing suddenly stopped and turned towards the youth. Elrond and Gandalf stared at Harry as he sang, while Strider chuckled at everyone's awe-filled eyes. Like I said, it will take you off guard, said Strider with a smile. How can he have a voice like that? Asked Arwen in shock. I don't know, but he's gifted, said Strider. Once he was done singing, several people applauded him, and Harry blushed, much like he did at the Prancing Pony. Now a story, said Pippin, sitting on the floor. A story? Said Harry. Yeah, a tale from your home, said Merry. I'm not very good with stories, and beside, from what I can gather, yours are all about history. I'm not all that clear on my country's history, and I can't tell a thrilling tale to save my soul. Then tell us about your life, said Pippin. You wouldn't be able to, well, understand, said Harry. Give it a try, said Bilbo kindly. Well, this may take a while, said Harry. We have all night, said Elrond with a smile. Well, I grew up in town called Little Whinging, said Harry. And on into the night, he stopped at some intervals to further explain some things. Mostly things in the Muggle world, and a few things about the magical one, but they soon understood what he was talking about. Towards the end of Harry telling them about his third year, he stopped.
I think that's enough for right now,
said Harry with a smile as he looked at how late it had gotten. Wait, did you go and live with Sirius? Asked Pippin. No, but I hope I will someday, said Harry. Did they find Peter? Asked Merry. No, not yet, said Harry. That's enough questions. It is time for us to retire, said Elrond quietly. Grumbling, the hobbits went to their rooms, and Harry followed. Elrond stood back with Gandalf and Strider. To think, all that, and one gets the feeling he is still holding back, said Elrond. Indeed, he's being truthful, but he's hiding the pain he felt, said Gandalf. And most of that pain we probably cannot even begin to fathom, said Strider. The next day, Harry sat quietly beside the river and looked at the compass. It was pointing eastward out of the valley, Well, that tells me which direction to head. But when do I leave? Said Harry out loud. Harry, said a voice coming from behind him. Harry turned, and it was Elrond. Yes, sir, he asked, as he stood up quickly. Would you like to lend us your voice in the council meeting? Said Elrond with a smile. Perhaps the ways of your world could help us in ours. Gee, I don't know. I don't have anything to contribute to it, said Harry. Yours and mine are a bit different. Perhaps, and yet perhaps not, said Elrond. I have found that wisdom can come from the most unlikely inspirations. Oh, well, okay, I'll come, said Harry with uncertainty. He followed Elrond all the way into an open stone area with wooden chairs. Every one of the representatives were seated facing a square pedestal. Harry took a seat beside Frodo and waited until it started. For several hours, they debated the history of Mordor and the One Ring. Harry noticed, however, that neither Gandalf nor Elrond spoke of King Mandalore. Harry took the initiative and also refrained from discussing the matter, but he, over the course of those hours, learned a bit more about what was going to happen or might happen. Bring forth the ring, Frodo, said Elrond, looking at the hobbit to Harry's left. Frodo looked around nervously. Harry looked at him. Do you want me to put it over there? Asked Harry. Frodo held the ring out slowly for Harry to take it. Harry reached to take the ring and place it on the pedestal, but an electric shock ran through his body and caused him to slam back into his own chair. Oh, I'm never going to learn that lesson, am I? Said Harry weakly with a laugh. What do you mean? Said Gandalf, who was taken aback by the flash of light. It happened once before, in the Prancing Pony. Sorry, Frodo, you're on your own, said Harry with a nervous laugh, as he rubbed his slightly burnt fingers. Frodo looked at the ring in his hand, but slowly walked over and placed it heavily on the square block of stone. He walked back to his chair and heaved a sigh with a peaceful look on his face. Silence ensued. The people that were gathered stared intently at the ring. The elves held a calculating look, while the dwarves winced slightly when they gazed upon it. Harry noticed, however, that one man, Boromir, was looking at it with a sort of possessed longing. Harry reached into his pouch and felt around until his hand came upon the amethyst. If this Boromir was going to try something, he'd have to go through Harry first, waiting for the man to make the first move. It is a gift, Boromir stood up. A gift to the foes of Mordor. Funny, I see it as a curse, said Harry. Elrond looked at him. He had a small, proud smile. Look what disaster it had brought to the Shire. Several farmers killed trying to protect their lands from those Black Riders. The gateman of Bree was crushed as they forced their way into the town, and Frodo was stabbed. A gift? I think not, said Harry. When the hell did I start talking fancy? Must be rubbing off on me. What would a child know, said the man dismissively. Why should we not use this ring? Long has my father, the steward of Gondor, kept the forces of Mordor at bay. By the blood of our people are your lands kept safe, he gestured to the surrounding council members. Give Gondor the weapon of the enemy. His face grew into a great smile, a hopeful smile. Let us use it against him. You cannot wield it, said Strider. None of us can. It answers to Sauron alone. It has no other master. Harry smiled over at Strider. Thank goodness he isn't like him. And what would a ranger know of this matter? Said Boromir snidely. More than yourself knows, said Harry with a frown. He is no mere ranger. He is Aragorn, son of Arathorn. You owe him your allegiance, said Legolas, standing swiftly up. The man looked slowly over to Strider, who looked like he would rather the information go unknown. Aragorn? He said weakly. This is Isildur's heir. Harry looked over to Strider quickly. Wait a minute, he thought. Isildur, wasn't he the... Oh my god. And heir to the throne of Gondor, added Legolas. Strider, or Aragorn, motioned the elf to sit and spoke in the same language he and Arwen spoke often. Legolas did not take his eyes off the steward's son, but sat down slowly. Gondor has no king. Gondor needs no king, said Boromir fiercely as he went back to sit. Harry clenched his hand around the amethyst tighter, just in case that he tried to make a grab for the ring. The man sat down, however, and chose to glare at Aragorn. Aragorn is right, said Gandalf strongly. We cannot use it. You have only one choice. The ring must be destroyed, said Elrond with a stern tone. Several people nodded, but the man looked crestfallen. Harry noticed Frodo tightened up slightly. What are we waiting for? Said one of the dwarves. He picked up his axe and lunged at it. Elrond moved to stop him, but the dwarf had already picked up his axe and brought it crashing down upon the ring. Tirploia ar scry, he cried. The axe severed itself upon the ring, and both Gandalf and Harry noticed Frodo flinch horribly. The dwarf was left sprawled on the ground, shaken but unhurt. The ring cannot be destroyed, Gimli, son of Glowing, by any craft we here possess, said Elrond, looking around the room, but stopped for a moment at Harry. The ring was made in the fires of Mount Doom. Only there can it be unmade. It must be taken deep into Mordor and cast it back into the fiery chasm from whence it came. A silence fell upon them all. One of you must do this, said Elrond. Another, but thicker silence fell. You couldn't even hear the wind blow or the leaves falling gently to the ground. One does not simply walk into Mordor, said Boromir quietly. Its black gates are guarded by more than just orcs. There is an evil there that does not sleep, and the great eye is always watching. 'Tis a barren wasteland, riddled with fire and ash and dust. The very air you breathe is a poisonous fume. Not with 10,000 men could you do this. It is folly. Sounds like London in the old days, thought Harry with a slight smirk. Have you heard nothing Lord Elrond has said Legolas to the doubtful man. The ring must be destroyed. And I suppose you're the one to do it, said Gimli with a deep-voiced sneer. He didn't say that, Mr. Gimli, said Harry quickly. He was only saying what we needed to do. But Gimli didn't take notice. And if we fail, what then? Baudemar stood up again. What will happen if Sauron takes back what is his? Harry went to answer him, but Gimli stood up and challenged Legolas. I will be dead before I see the ring in the hands of an elf, he shouted. The elf stood up to shout back, but Legolas held them back. No one trusts an elf, shouted Gimli. Soon everyone was shouting, all except Gandalf, Aragorn, Frodo, Elrond, and Harry. Harry groaned. This isn't going very well. Then Gandalf began to join in the fray and shout to the man who was causing all the ruckus. Harry looked over to Frodo, who was looking at the ring with a horror-filled look, and then he stood up. I will take it, Frodo shouted, but his words could reach no one. Harry took his hand, noticing that there was no shock crashing through his body. Are you sure? Frodo turned towards him. I am. Well then, let's quiet down the circus, shall we? Harry said with a sad smile. He took the amethyst jewel from his pouch and held it high. Crack! Bolt of lightning came down and struck the jewel in Harry's hand. The council and Elrond looked over at Harry in shock. What Harry didn't know is for a brief instant he gave off a soft golden light and briefly wore a red cape, a white silk shirt with a rising sun embroidered in sparkling thread on the breast. Harry lowered his arm and the glow with the image faded. Frodo has something to say, said Harry with a smile. Go on, Frodo. Frodo took a breath. I will take the ring to Mordor. The council looked at the small halfling with wonder in their eyes. Though I do not know the way, said Frodo weakly. Gandalf gave a sad smile. I will help you bear this burden, Frodo Baggins. As long as it is yours to bear. He walked over to where Frodo was standing. Aragorn stood up. By my life or death, I can protect you. I will. He went and knelt in front of Frodo. You will have my sword, and you will have my bow, said the Legolas. And my axe, said Gimli. Legolas rolled his eyes as the dwarf came over to join them. Boromir walked slowly over to them. You carry the fate of us all, little one. If this indeed the rule of the council, then Gondor will see it done. Hey, came a shout from behind Harry's seat. They turned and saw Sam scurrying out from behind a bush and rushing to stand beside Frodo, with his arms crossed. Elrond looked shocked at first, but he smiled. Mr. Frodo isn't going anywhere without me, said Sam firmly. No, I think it is hardly possible to separate you two when he is invited to a secret council meeting and you are not, said Elrond with a smirk. But he was in for another surprise as Harry could see two more curly-headed rascals from behind two pillars. Oi, we're coming too, said Merry. Elrond looked at them, and as they ran past him and looked around, expecting more to pop up from the ground. You'll have to send us home tied up in a sack to stop us, said Merry. Anyway, said Pippin, you need people with intelligence on this sort of mission quest thing. Gandalf looked up and shook his head. Merry turned to him. Well, that rules you out, Pippin. 9 companions. So be it. You shall be the Fellowship of the Ring, said Elrond with a smile. Right, said Pippin. Where are we going? Harry laughed out loud. You aren't heading to Happy Valley, I can tell you right now, said Harry with a smile. Aren't you going? Asked Pippin quickly. Do you wish to go along as well? Asked Elrond. Both he and Aragorn hoped he would say no. It may be easier to find what you seek if you wait till the danger passes. If I can go along with them, I would rather go now. That way I can help out and find the stones at the same time, said Harry. Is there room in the company? More than enough, said Merry happily. Then I'll go. I'll be more useful there than I will here, said Harry. But remember, said Elrond, coming close to him, of what you yourself bear. You carry as great a treasure as the ring is. I'll be careful, said Harry. Very well, you leave the morning after next. Prepare yourselves, said Elrond. Come with me, Harry. Harry followed Elrond over to a part of Rivendell that Harry hadn't explored yet. It was a forge where there were 3 elves working tirelessly forging swords. I asked them to craft you a sword here, he said, lifted a sword carefully off a cloth-covered stone table. The blade was a light silver and the handle was a dark twisted metal with emeralds on the handle. It's called King's Wrath Valerian, said Elrond, placing the sword in an ornate leather scabbard. Use them well. Aragorn will teach you how to further your skills. Thank you, said Harry quietly. He held the sword high and watched it as it glinted in the sunlight. I'll take care of it. Sirius and Remivas stared at the bed Harry was sleeping on. He had still not woken up or even turned in his sleep. His wounds that he occurred in Hogwarts were still unhealed, but the others that seemed to crop up with no explanation were healing just as suddenly as they had come, and from time to time he seemed to just seize right before them as if he were being electrocuted. I wish this was just a dream and Harry's was just fine, said Sirius sadly. Me too, said Remus. Dumbledore then came in. He looked as if age had finally caught up with him and sunk into a nearby chair, leaning back and sighing heavily. It is fortunate that Harry is here. Why, what happened? Asked Sirius, looking over to Dumbledore. He didn't think he could take any more bad news as of that moment. The Weasleys' home had just been subjected to a raid in the search for Harry, said Dumbledore sadly. What, is the burrow okay? Asked Remus. Umbridge burnt it to the ground, said Dumbledore, looking down at Harry. It seems she wants him that badly. I can't believe this, said Sirius angrily. Of what bloody harm is it to keep Harry around? Why do they want to just outkill him? I do not know what the Ministry fears when this happens, but they will not get him, I can assure you. Only certain members of the Order, the Weasley children, and Hermione knows he is here. They would never sell him out. Thankfully, the children are all here, and they will remain here. I fear what could happen if they were in Hogwarts, said Dumbledore. That's no problem, but you're sure that no one can find Harry here? Said Sirius earnestly. No one? Not unless I tell them myself where to find him, said Dumbledore, walking up to where Harry's head rested and placed an old hand on Harry's young brow, and I will never do so. Sirius and Remus looked at him somberly. Both of you go and get some rest. I'll sit with him. It's the very least I owe him, said Dumbledore. If something happens, I will fetch you, he added, to Sirius's face full of worry. Come on, Padfoot, you need to get something to eat anyway, said Remus, as he gently pulled Sirius towards the door. Dumbledore conjured a squashy purple armchair and placed it close to the headboard of Harry's bed. He reached down and took Harry's unmoving hand in his own. Come back, Harry. I'm begging you. There's so much I haven't told you, and so much I need to apologize for, he said as tears fell down his crooked nose and disappeared into his snow-white beard. Harry woke up early the next morning and began filling his pack with a separate set of elvish clothes, choosing to wear the outfit that Strider gave him. Harry wrapped his new sword belt around his waist and secured the sword in the scabbard. He hurried down into the kitchens and gathered up all the heartiest fruits, breads, nuts, and spices he could gather to take with him on the journey. Are you hoping that you'll get some game along the way? Said Willowdew with a smile. Am I crazy to do so? Asked Harry quickly. Crazy? Asked Willowdew. Foolish? Said Harry with an apologetic smile. Oh, well, not necessarily. Once you get past Gondor, though, game is hard to come by, said Willowdew. But by that time, you'll be past the Golden Wood. They'll give you some Lemba's bread. What's that? Said Harry. It's an elvish bread that doesn't spoil for a long time, and a single mouthful will sustain you for the entire day, said Willowdew. I would make it, but unfortunately, Merry and Pippin both ate over half our crop of blackberries and honey. Doesn't surprise me, said Harry with a smile. Here, take some of this 11 water with you. It'll always stay fresh, and even a small sip will refresh you completely, said Willotto, handing Harry several large crystal bottles. Thanks. This should last the entire trip, said Harry with a smile. When you get to Lothlorien, they'll fill the bottles before you leave, said Willotto. Thanks again, said Harry with a smile. Willow then brought him into a large hug. Be safe, dear, said Willotto quietly, and listen to Aragorn and Gandalf. I will, said Harry gently. He carefully pulled away and walked out of the kitchen, sneaking a look back at the venerable elf as she dabbed her eyes with a silk handkerchief. He hurried out into the courtyard and saw the rest of them gathered around the same pony that they led here from Bree. Here, Harry, you can put that pack on Bill here, said Sam, patting the horse's flank. Sure thing, said Harry. Once they were all packed and ready, they made their way slowly out of the valley. Harry took one last glance at the mausoleum. Harry smiled softly down at it and continued up the path. I'll try. They made it out of the valley and continued into the east. Not really speaking, the company was tense and hobbits were silent. Frodo pretty much just looked forward and had a blank look on his face. Sam was focused on Frodo and not taking his eyes off him, and both Aragorn and Harry had a hard time trying to keep Merry and Pippin from running off and hunting mushrooms and other berries. You two need to keep up, said Strider, almost dragging Pippin back to the rest of them, as Harry led Merry back. We're hungry, said Pippin. Come here, said Harry as he walked over to Bill. He opened his own pack and took out a small loaf of strawberry bread. Share that. Next time, ask for food. Don't leave us. Okay, Harry, said Pippin, as he took a large bit out of the loaf and then had to fend off Merry and Sam to keep it for himself. They listened so well, said Harry with a laugh as he watched the wrestle on the ground for the bread. You did a good job tracking, said Strider with a smile. It only took you 7 minutes to find them this time. I'm getting better. Slowly, said Harry. He put his hand in his pouch and pulled out the small compass and held it out. The little needle was pointing straight ahead. Do our paths still go together? Asked Aragorn quietly, dreading the day that they may have to split up and go their own paths. For a while it looks, said Harry with a smile. Hope you don't mind if I all of a sudden wander off. Only if you don't mind me dragging you back, said Strider, patting the boy's back. Before they had decided to stop for the night, Harry heard a faint tune wafting towards him.
Hear that? Asked Harry in a whisper.
No, what is it? Asked Strider. Harry took off swiftly and followed the sound. Strider called to the others to stop and followed Harry into the heavily wooded area beside them. Harry followed the music until finally he was led to a small house in the middle of the wood. Harry? Said Strider, coming up behind him. Where is it? It's in that house, I think, said Harry. That's where the music is coming from. All right, let's go see, said Strider. They opened the door. Inside, the house appeared to be uninhabited. There were cobwebs almost everywhere, and the food lying on the counter and in the pantry were past rotten. Where is this jewel? Said Strider. Hang on, said Harry, walking slowly into the room. He walked towards where the melody was coming from. The entire room seemed to have it vibrate off every surface. He went closer to a small cabinet on the other side of the room, thinking perhaps it was in there. He made to open the small door, when suddenly a crash came from the ceiling. Harry dove out of the way and found he was nose to snout with a ferocious black wolf. Harry! Get back! Said Strider loudly. How the hell did it get on the roof? Shouted Harry, recoiling quickly and pulling out his sword. We'll worry about that later, said Strider, pulling Harry back hard. Right now, we need to go. As Harry pulled back as the wolf snapped his fangs in the dead space and where Harry's face once was, the wolf growled deeply and then lunged towards the skinnier figure. Harry raised the sword in both hands, found the sword to be exceedingly light, dropped the one hand and swung the sword cleanly through the air. It seemed that the sword knew where it wanted to go. The wolf fell to the ground with a sickening thud, the severed torso first, then the lower abdomen. Harry stared at the body of the wolf in shock. Your first real kill with a sword, not easy to do or to forget. Thankfully it wasn't a person, said Strider. Don't be too sure, said Harry as his eyes grew larger. Strider looked down at the body of the wolf and saw with horror that the creature slowly turned into a black bearded man. His face was scarred, his teeth blackened, and his nails chipped and bloodied. What on earth? Said Strider, his face pale. What could have caused that? Was he a skin changer? Not really. Look what just fell out of his stomach, said Harry, reached over into the thick pool of blood and pulled out a small rock. What is it? Asked Strider. Well, said Harry, as his hands fumbled with a dusty rag lying on the floor. If I can wipe the blood off, there, in his hands, laid a slightly blood-stained diamond. It's a good thing you sliced him clean through, isn't it? Said Strider with a dry chuckle. More like luck. I don't think I controlled the sword at that point, said Harry. Well, it is an elvish blade, said Strider with a smile. They can put the strangest powers in them, some give you a warning before danger strikes, others have an icy poison in them, and others give you the strength and also seem to give you the skills to use the sword. Well, that's convenient, said Harry with a smile. So, do you think that jewel gives the ability to change into a wolf? Asked Strider as he helped Harry to stand. Won't know till I clean it up and test it out. I'll ask Gandalf about it before I try, said Harry. His voice was shaky. He tried to convince himself that the man attacked them first and did all he could to try and kill them. But killing a person, it made him sick to his stomach. Lad, you couldn't do anything else. If you had faltered, you would be this man's next meal, said Strider. Best save the mercy for a much later time. They made their way quickly back to the Fellowship, but they stopped beside a small creek, cleaned their swords, and wiped the diamond free of blood. So, what made you so shaken up? Said Harry. You've killed wolves before, especially from Bree to Rivendell. You, or the hobbits, weren't that close to the beast's teeth, said Strider, washing his face quickly. Didn't know you cared, said Harry with a smile. I care more than you think, said Strider, giving Harry a smack to the back of his head. They made their way back to where the Fellowship was and was greeted with a curious pair of hobbit. Where did you go? Asked Merry quickly. How come you yell at us when we take off? Said Pippin sourly. Harry smiled. I heard something, and I needed to check it out. Gandalf looked up quickly. Harry saw Strider give him a small nod. And what did you find? That it was just a little animal in the leaves, sneered Boromir. Harry smirked. Close. Boromir frowned. One gets the feeling that the boy is holding back something, he whispered to Gimli. Said Gimli, but he looked at Harry skeptically. Legolas also heard what Boromir had said, but he took no heed. But he couldn't stop himself from becoming suspicious himself. Harry could see the distrust in both the elf and dwarf's eyes. Boromir isn't going to make this trip any easier for me, he thought somberly. Harry helped Sam prepare the Fellowship's dinner that night. Before night had completely fallen, Legolas had shot a deer standing serenely in the nearby woods and brought it back to the company. Despite the impeding darkness, he only needed one arrow to fell the poor beast, causing Harry and the hobbits to stare in awe. Gimli, however, only frowned at the show-offness of the elf. Aragorn had skinned and dressed the deer for the hobbit and young man, and they roasted it over a large crackling fire. As the fire slowly roasted the meat, Harry sprinkled different herbs and squeezed a few berries over it. What are you doing, lad? Asked Gimli, looking at what Harry was doing. And Gimli didn't look all that impressed. It would be hard to win him over with Harry adding things to the tasty meat. I'm adding flavor, said Harry slowly as he rotated the meat on the spit. Why, meat is meat, said Gimli. The flavor doesn't need to be changed. I know, but wait until you try it, said Harry with a smile. You might like it. After Sam and Harry had finished cooking the meat that Strider had expertly carved from the deer, each member took a bit of it. Pippin and Merry tore into it greedily, knowing full well that it was going to be delicious. This is great, said Merry with his mouth full. I haven't had this tasty a dish on the road before, said Pippin. You've never been on the road for more than 3 days. Before, said Merry, shooting his cousin and best friend a smirk. Gimli looked at it with some skepticism. Then he slowly took a bite out of the large chunk of meat. They're right, it is good, said Gimli hesitantly. Legolas took a bite out of his own smaller piece and closed his eyes. He could taste the juice of the berries that was drizzled over it and roasted deep into the flesh. You should come to Mirkwood. My father would love to have you as his personal cook, said Legolas to Harry. Forget Mirkwood. Come to Lonely Mountain. Lord Dane would be proud for you to come to him, said Gimli. Harry looked at the both of them with a smile. Those are both tempting offers, but I would really like to try and head for home. It is for the best, said Boromir, throwing away the bone from his piece of venison. Strider looked at Boromir in disbelief. He didn't think, not after the council meeting and what he had said when they returned from the small cottage, that Boromir could be understanding towards his young protege. He didn't believe that Boromir would offer Harry a place in Gondor. He wasn't disappointed. This meat isn't worthy of gracing the trough of a swine, said Boromir, standing up and walking away. Gimli and Legolas flashed their eyes angrily over to Boromir. It doesn't bother me. I'd be taken aback if he said he liked it, to be honest, said Harry with a smile, trying to pacify the two. Gimli and Legolas both smiled softly at the young man while Boromir scoffed. Later on, Gandalf sat away from the rest of them, looking hard into the east towards their final destination, but looking fleetingly into the southeast to where Saruman had his tower. Gandalf? Said a voice quietly. Gandalf bolted out of his solitary thoughts and looked around. There he saw the bright green eyes of the young man chosen by King Miandinbor from beyond the grave. Ah, Harry, that was a delicious meal you and Samwise made. Quite the treat for a quest, said Gandalf with a smile. Thanks. Boromir seemed to be the only one who didn't like it, but that's to be expected, said Harry with a grin. I wanted to talk to you about something. About that little jaunt that you and Aragorn took this afternoon, asked Gandalf with a smile. Exactly, here it is, said Harry, holding out the diamond that he had acquired earlier that day. It was in the belly of a wolf that had then turned into a man, said Harry. Well, something that looked like a man. Gandalf held the diamond up to the light gently glowing from his staff and examined it closely. It's stained with blood, said Gandalf. Yeah, apparently the guy ate it, said Harry. I really don't know how he managed to eat it, but he did. You forget, people other than kings and wizards cannot see it, so it wouldn't be surprising that someone were to accidentally devour these jewels, said Gandalf. I still can't believe that someone can eat a rock this size and not even know it, said Harry, shaking his head. There are many strange and mysterious things in this world. You are one of them, said Gandalf with a smile. On my end, I'm seeing a lot more strange things here than I ever did back home, said Harry. Gandalf handed Harry's newly acquired diamond. What power do you think that gem possesses? Well, when we removed the diamond, then he turned back into a man. So, I'm assuming that you can turn into at least a wolf, said Harry. I don't know if you can turn into another animal besides that. But maybe I can test it, but I'd rather not eat it. I do not find fault with that. In order to be rid of the transformation, you'd have to either wait a long time or have it forcibly removed, said Gandalf with a smile. Perhaps it would work if I had it around my neck, said Harry thoughtfully. I just need a chain and a way to stick the jewel to it. How would you cause it to activate? Obviously touching it does nothing, said Gandalf. I'm not too sure, but I have a feeling I'll be finding it out really soon, said Harry. Harry looked at the jewel closely and smiled. That evening, Harry laid on his back and looked up at all the stars. He thought about Sirius, Ron, Hermione, and everyone else back at Hogwarts and Grimmauld Place. Do they even realize that I'm gone? Said Harry, looking up at the sky. If this is a whole nother world, has time even gone by? The night passed on by. Harry was surprised to not be woken for guard duty. He had strange dreams about feathers, fur, and teeth. Each one of them flew off their respected animal hosts and was absorbed by the diamond, and then his hand, moving against his will, touched the diamond. Suddenly, he would sprout feathers, wings, and a beak or fur and fangs. Harry woke with a start, looked at his arms and legs, and settled back onto pack he used as a pillow and fell back to sleep. Once again, he dreamed the exact same dream, but this time he saw himself grasp the jewel, which was now around his neck. He shouted, "Hawk." Then Harry saw that his image soon changed into that of an actual hawk, and he watched as he himself flew away. Harry woke early the next morning and took out the small diamond. Someone is really making this quest easy, he said to himself. He stood up and walked over to where the deerskin laid, waiting to be used. Harry took a small bit of the fur or hair, Harry wasn't sure, and held it up to the diamond. Harry had to turn his head away from the bright flash of light that came from it. When he looked back at the jewel and the hair was gone, I want to know where all these dreams come from, said Harry, because they're a big help. Then a thought struck him. He reached up and tugged a small amount of his hair out of his own scalp. He then held it out to the diamond. It flashed, though not as brighter this time, and it disappeared. He leaned against the tree that he sat in front of and turned the diamond slowly over in his hand. Well, if I ever get a chain, I can turn into a deer and back again, thought Harry to himself. He heard a clatter of wood in front of where he was sitting, and he looked up quickly. It was Boromir dropping more firewood beside the campfire they had going all night. What caused you to get up so early? Strider said to leave you out of guard duty last night, said Boromir shortly. Why did he not want me to keep watch? Asked Harry. I do not know. The great Aragorn, son of Arathorn, does not wish to inform me of his reasons, said Boromir sarcastically. Now what made you get up so early? I was just thinking, said Harry calmly. No harm in that, is there? All depends on what you are thinking, said Boromir darkly. I know there is some secret motive that made you came along on this quest. We didn't exactly speak in hushed voices when the meeting was done, said Harry as he placed the jewel back in his pouch. I'll be watching you closely, boy, said Boromir. Do as you please, said Harry as he stood up. I'll go and get breakfast gathered up. Harry stood up and turned towards the forest. He had seen the patch of berries and the nut trees before the sun had completely set, and when Sam and he had gone to look for the herbs, he needed to make dinner. He took one of Sam's pots with him and filled it full of different berries and nuts. He looked up and saw that a rich, full apple tree was only a few yards away. This will fill them up even faster, said Harry with a smile. He climbed the tree and filled the crook of his arm full of apples. Suddenly, he heard a group of footsteps coming towards himself and their camp. I saw a fire somewhere around here last night. Must be travelers. Should be easy pickings, said a weedy voice. As long as they ain't goblins again, said a deeper voice. That was all Dumbledore, said the weedy voiced man. Well, he paid for it with his life. So let's go and see what we can get, said the deeper voiced man. Harry looked down through the branches and saw two men walking underneath him. One man was hunched over, fingering a jagged dagger, and another was a thick, burly-looking man with a broad sword. He wasn't too sure how many of the Fellowship was up, but if they were to get close to Frodo and see what he was carrying, they would all be in danger of a massive assault. He took two of the apples he had plucked from the tree and threw them hard at the two men's heads. "Oh, thou!" shouted the hunched man in a weedy voice. Before the burly man could look up into the tree, Harry fell to the earth and raised his sword. "What do you want?" he asked both the men. "Your coins and other valuable objects," said the weedy-voiced man, putting a hand to a large lump forming on his temple. "I'll have to decline," said Harry with a smile. "You'll regret that," said the deep-voiced man. The man raised his own sword and brought it crashing down. Harry reached into his pouch and grabbed the opal. Suddenly, the world about him began to move sluggishly. He easily disarmed the man and sent him sprawling to the ground. The hunched man stared in amazement at the youth. Harry released the hold he had on the opal and smirked at the hunched man. The man backed swiftly away and took off. Harry pointed his sword down on the fallen man's throat. The man came to his senses slowly and looked fearfully at the youth with the sword. "Your friend took off. I suggest you follow if you value any part of your life," said Harry coldly, "and find another line of work." The man staggered to his feet and followed hastily after his friend. Harry smirked once more and turned back towards the tree he was perched in earlier and grabbed the pan and picked several more apples from the lower branches. "You fight well," said a voice coming from behind him. Harry turned swiftly. He saw Legolas standing beside a tree and smiling. "How long have you been there?" asked Harry. "A few moments at best," said Legolas with a smile. "Aragorn has trained you well." "I'm still learning," said Harry with a smile. "Well, I got breakfast here. Want to head back?" "In a moment, I wish to breathe in the forest air. It is uncertain when we will be graced by the coolness of a forest next," said Legolas. "I will join you all later." Harry made his way slowly back to the camp and placed the pan and apples near the fire. Gandalf, Gimli, and Aragorn were now up as well. The only ones who seemed to be sleeping in were the hobbits. "Good morning, lad. What's for breakfast?" asked Gimli gruffly. "I've got berries, nuts, apples, and some nut bread in my pack," said Harry, reaching and bringing out a small loaf. "Sounds delightful," said Gandalf, taking a few berries and an apple. When Aragorn came closer to grab a handful of berries, Harry grabbed his arm. "Why didn't you wake me up for guard duty last night?" asked Harry quietly. "I figured you had enough excitement for one day, and letting you sleep seemed to be the best idea," said Aragorn. "Oh, thanks," said Harry sheepishly. "You're welcome," said Aragorn with a laugh. "Let's get the hobbits up so we may continue on," said Gandalf. "This'll do it," said Harry. He cleared his throat loudly. "If they don't get up, breakfast will be all gone." Instantly, all four hobbits woke up quickly and looked around. "Did we miss breakfast?" asked Pippin thickly. "Just about. Come on," said Harry as the rest of the company laughed at the priorities of hobbits. Back in London, Umbridge was standing in front of the Minister of Magic's desk with that toad-like smile on her lips. "Any word about Potter?" asked Fudge, rifling through some papers. "Nothing yet, but we'll find him and put the poor boy out of his pain," said Umbridge, trying to sound sympathetic. "I want him examined first," said Fudge sternly. "To make sure what you say is true. We haven't had that sort of affliction for a long time, and it would look bad for us if we just killed him on sight." Of course, sir, said Umbridge, with a simpering smile. I do have one question, said Fudge, his voice suddenly cold. And that is, said Umbridge, with a smirk. Was setting fire to the Weasley house all that necessary? Asked Fudge, with a curious look. I'm getting heat from almost every department. And the Wizengamot seems a lot of people has a soft spot for Arthur and his family. It was necessary, sir. The Weasleys are very close to Potter, and if he was hidden in the house, it was imperative that he's found, said Umbridge. Did you even search the house before you ignited it? Said Fudge. We couldn't. Arthur's wife wouldn't let us get near the house. We had no choice, said Umbridge with a smile. You could have contacted Madame Bones. She would have had the authority to go in and search for the boy, said Fudge. I can't afford to have you setting homes on fire. It won't look good for me. Yes, sir, said Umbridge, her smile failing slightly. He dismissed her and went about his work again. Umbridge left the minister's office, ignored Percy. He did his best to hide his glare, and made her way out of the Ministry of Magic. Percy was loyal to the Ministry, but that didn't give them the right to torch his family home. Slowly, the Ministry was losing their control over him, and he wasn't even going to try to rationalize their decision to burn his parents' home. Kingsley was walking down one of the corridors, a load of papers in his arms. He was delivering them to Madame Bones when he heard something from a closed room that made his blood freeze and the rest of his body with it.
How much longer is it going to take you to find the brat? Spat a voice that he recognized as Umbridge's. Is he at that mudblood Granger's house?
No, we checked there, said another voice. A voice that Kingsley couldn't really identify. Did you burn it and incarcerate them to be on the safe side? Said Umbridge. The minister won't take notice of a pair of no-account muggles. No, ma'am, but we can do it after dark. Make it look like an accident, said the voice. Without hesitation, Kingsley hurried down to the flue exits and disappeared in a whirl of green fire out of the shadows. Umbridge appeared with a cloaked wizard. I knew it. Mrs. Granger was just setting the table for dinner as her husband ladled the stew into a serving dish when they both heard a pounding on the door. Mr. Granger looked at his wife and slowly went to the door. When he got there, Kingsley was looking around swiftly in the deserted street behind him. Can I help you, sir? Asked Mr. Granger. I'm Kingsley Shacklebolt from the Ministry of Magic. May I come in? Said Kingsley as he made his way quickly into the house. Why, yes, of course, said Mr. Granger. Is something wrong with Hermione? Asked Mrs. Granger worriedly. No, she is fine. Have you spoken to anyone from the Ministry earlier today or at all this week? Asked Kingsley quickly. No, should we have? Asked Mr. Granger, looking confused. Kingsley turned a slight pale color and ran to the window. Peeking out of the side, there he saw 3 people standing silently in the street, with Madame Umbridge leading them. We need to get out of here now, said Kingsley sharply. Suddenly an explosion that shook the whole street happened. People ran out of their houses in panic and screaming to their children to know where they were. The Muggles never even noticed the 4 people standing, watching the fire. Umbridge brought out what looked like opera glasses and looked at the base of the burning rubble. Through the broken and charred door, she could see a blackened hand of a dark adult male. There later, we will find out if the boy was in there or not. If he was, it's what Kingsley deserved for going against the Ministry, and as for the Muggles, well, it's not like they made a difference in the world, is it? She smiled and walked away, leaving the men behind her to look at each other uncomfortably. The Fellowship made their way slowly past the roots of a great snowy mountain chain. Harry stared in awe at the amazing size and majestic beauty of it, never having seen a mountain in all its splendor before. It's called Caradros, said Gimli, gesturing towards one of the taller mountain peaks. Under that great crown of rock and stone lies the great mines of Moria. My cousin Balin rules there now. Bowling? Said Harry, perplexed. Wasn't he one of the... Yes, he was one of the dwarves that traveled with Bilbo to Lonely Mountain 60 years ago, said Gandalf from the front of the troop. Ah, to visit him. You know, Gandalf, if we went under the mountain instead of around it, we could save at least a week, said Gimli. I would rather save that path for a last resort, said Gandalf grimly. Harry looked at Gandalf with a look of concern on his face. If Gandalf didn't want to go somewhere where there were a mine full of valuable allies, something wasn't adding up. Gimli, however, didn't see it that way and fell into a dark mood for the rest of the day. Merry and Pippin found that the area allowed no opportunity to forage for a quick snack. They tried sneaking a small morsel of food from Sam's pack, but both were thumped soundly with Sam's walking stick. Get off, said Sam angrily. Come on, Sam, we're hungry, whined Pippin. I've already given you two your food for today. We need to ration it, said Sam shortly. Here, you two, said Harry, taking a bit of bread and broke it in half. Just bread, said Mary, slightly put out. I baked cheese in there with it, said Harry with a smirk. That piece of information brightened Pippin and Mary's mood when they heard it, and they snatched the bread away greedily. Keep it up, and there'll be no food left, said Boromir darkly. I planned on their constant snacking before we even left Rivendell, so I made extra food for them and rationing it, said Harry with a smirk. Boromir scowled and didn't bother to make slamming into the boy with his elbow subtle. Harry had to hold out an arm to stop Strider. I'm fine. He just wants to find something wrong with me, said Harry with a smile. If he keeps it up, I'll make something wrong with him, said Strider darkly. They stopped for the night on a large pile of rocks. Harry couldn't see how this place would be very comfortable, especially for someone as old as Gandalf. But Aragorn showed him that, while they sacrificed comfort, they could see if any of Saruman's winged spies were coming and they could hide amongst the rocks. It was Boromir's turn to go out and get dinner that night, so he borrowed Aragorn's bow and quiver, then left the campsite. I hope he gets a deer, said Gimli. I'll be happy with whatever he gets, said Pippin. That's no surprise, said Gandalf with a good-natured smile. Harry smiled as he helped Legolas pile the firewood in the circle of stones they had formed. Gimli started the fire with his father's old tinderbox. Once Harry had positioned the wood where he wanted, he walked over to his pack. What are you doing, Harry? Asked Frodo curiously from where he was resting. Well, in that last village we passed through, I bought something, and I want to see if I can make what I want out of it, said Harry. And if I can, I will be really happy. He took one of Sam's pans and poured a white powder into it, sprinkled in a different powder, and then poured some water from his canteen into the pan. After dousing his own hands with the water, he used his hand to stir the contents of the iron pan. Soon, it became sticky and immensely thick. Hey, said Pippin excitedly. You made dough. Exactly, said Harry with a smile. Now let's see if I can bake it. He took out his own frying pan and borrowed Sam's. He took medium-sized clumps of dough and placed it in one of the frying pans. Once he had used up all the dough and filled the frying pan, he flipped the other pan over top of it and buried it under the burning wood. Now we wait and see if my idea will work, said Harry. Hope it turns out all right. The sun began to set further into the west. Finally, Boromir came back with a tight group of conies tied to a bed of rope. No deer to be had, but there's plenty of rabbits about, said Boromir. What do you want to do with them, Sam? Asked Harry. How about a stew? Said Sam. Sounds good to me, said Harry. Sam took charge of cooking that night, as Harry had never made anything out of rabbits in his stay here in this strange world. Harry watched earnestly on what Sam placed into the large pot and helped him cut up the rabbits Boromir had brought. Too bad we don't have some potatoes, said Sam. Ooh, those sound good right about now, said Harry with a smirk. That night, they enjoyed Sam's rabbit stew with slightly the same fervor that they had for Harry's cooking. The bread Harry had made with the frying pans turned out very well. A little burnt on some places, but they were delicious nonetheless. That night, they were entertained with stories of old dwarven mines and treasures by Gimli. Legolas listened on dispassionately, but when describing the jewels, a faint smile came to his lips. He described the jewels in the great halls of his fathers. He told of newer tales of the Lonely Mountain and the small town of Dale, though even he did admit it himself. They weren't as thrilling as the dragon Smaug's destruction. It's nice to know that relative peace has come to Lonely Mountain, said Gandalf with a smile. Aye, but the occasional bandit does show up from time to time, said Gimli, trying not to look at Legolas. There's a story there. Good thing Gimli isn't going to bring it up. Thought Harry to himself. I wonder if a jewel is down there. I hope not, especially if we aren't going to go that way. Later that night, Strider had the first watch. Harry decided to sit up with him and learn a bit more about sounds in the night. They stayed awake all night, not allowing anyone else to relieve them. What's that noise? Asked Strider. A screech owl, said Harry. Very good, you're getting a grasp of this at last, said Strider with a proud smile. Suddenly, Harry heard a faint voice nearby. I smell food, so hungry. Harry looked at Strider, who didn't appear to have heard anything. Strider, did you hear that? Said Harry, looking around. No, was it music again? Asked Aragorn curiously. No, but if you can't hear it, then it's most likely a snake, said Harry, standing up. What do you mean? Said Strider, looking confused. Harry didn't answer. They both took a flaming brand and patrolled around the camp. It's over this way, Strider, whispered Harry as he stalked over towards where Gandalf was resting. He held the brand higher over himself and looked down at Gandalf. He almost dropped the torch. What is it? Said Strider, coming quickly over. Does he always sleep with his eyes open? Said Harry weakly. Strider looked down, and yes, Gandalf's eyes were open, but he was still sleeping soundly. I've never noticed. I've never watched him sleep when we've gone on quests before, said Strider with a quiet laugh. My eyes would dry out, said Harry, shaking his head. He moved the brand a little farther up Gandalf's body and saw... There it is, said Harry. Aragorn looked down and saw a snake slithering slowly up Gandalf's body. Waking Gandalf would be a bad idea, said Strider, before Harry could even begin to think about it. Let me try something. Get off. He hissed at the snake. Aragorn backed away from the hissing youth. Are you all right? The snake looked up at Harry, but obeyed after a short time. I forgot you said you could do that, said Aragorn. I just about forgot it, too, said Harry with a relieved sigh. Here's a bit of rabbit. Now get out of here, he hissed to the snake, and tossed a piece of the rabbit that Boromir had caught. Then a thought struck him. Hang on, come back here for one moment. I have a favor to ask, hissed Harry to the amazement. The shed of the veteran warrior. The snake turned and slowly slinked back to where the young man, speaking to it, was. Aragorn watched curiously as Harry held out the diamond to the snake. He gave another strangled hiss, and they watched as the snake slowly coiled around the youth's hand. The same hand that held the diamond. A bright flash of light came from under the snake's coils, and then the snake slithered towards the direction in which Harry had thrown the rabbit bit. What is it? Said Gandalf, sitting up and rubbing his eyes with 2 fingers. You had a snake on you, said Harry, standing up and beating the dirt off his pants. Gandalf looked quickly down and around himself. It's gone now, incidentally. How can you sleep with your eyes open? Said Harry with a bright smile. Years of practice. I thank you for getting rid of it. I'm not overly fond of snakes, said Gandalf. I've never known that, said Aragorn, trying not to laugh. I've never told anyone that, said Gandalf with a smirk. I think I'll stay awake with you fellows. I'm not too sure that I will fall back into an easy slumber. That night, Gandalf, Strider, and Harry both spoke well into the dawning hours, talking about what the future held for both quests. What if I have to, said Harry? If our paths separate, hopefully we will have taught you enough to make it on your own, said Gandalf with a calm smile. I hope so too, said Harry. I also hope that I won't have to leave. I'd miss you fellows, he added with a smile. Us as well, thought Gandalf, knowing Strider's mind. So, putting aside the uncertain future, what's the plan for getting around the mountains? Said Harry. We stay on Weir One for about 40 days until we reach the gap of Rohan, travel through Rohan, Gondor, and then finally into Mordor, said Gandalf. And then we do our damnedest to get through to Mount Doom, said Harry quietly. Exactly, said Gandalf. His face slightly fell. What does damnedest mean? Well, I guess I should rephrase it to do our best, said Harry. That makes much more sense, said Gandalf, looking amused. Soon the sun began to rise, and the others began to stir slightly. First Legolas awoke. He climbed to the top of the rock pile and relished the feeling of the sun on his fair skin. What's he doing? Asked Harry in an undertone. Mirkwood elves have a ritual in the morning. The younger ones climb to the top of the canopy of their woodland realm and greet the sun, said Aragorn quietly. He doesn't do that when the sun goes down, though, said Harry. That's a ritual for the elder ones, said Gandalf. Oh, said Harry. That's strange, he muttered. Once everyone had woken up, Sam proceeded to making as hearty breakfast as they could manage, and after Merry and Pippin ate their fill, they conned Boromir into teaching them how to use a sword. Strider chose to sit above them and watch their learnings. Legolas moved from one end of the rock pile to another, keeping a close eye on the distance. Harry and Gandalf conversed softly between the two of them, discussing the ways of magic and why Harry would never be able to use a staff in this world. These staffs are given to us when we finally leave apprenticeship, and it takes 100 years for someone to go through it, said Gandalf with a smile. I don't have that kind of time, said Harry. Guess I'm stuck with these, said Harry, patting the pouch of jewels on his side. Take care of practicing your magic. The enemies have spies everywhere, said Gandalf. Yes, sir, said Harry. If anyone were to ask for my opinion, which I know they have not, said Gimli, grumbling slightly, I would say that we are taking the long way around. Harry rolled his eyes slightly, this argument again. Gandalf, we could go through the mines of Moria. My cousin Balin would give us a royal welcome. Gandalf sighed. No, Gimli, I would not go through Moria unless I had no other choice. It was a repeated speech that he had said the other day. Move your feet, said Strider from where he was sitting. Harry stood up and walked over to the overlook to where the hobbits and the man were sparring. Harry smiled warmly at the man. He noticed that when dealing with Merry and Pippin, his eyes were filled with a tenderness that Harry didn't know he had. Suddenly, Boromir made a mistake and brought the flat edge of his sword down on Pippin's fingers. Ow, said Pippin, dropping his sword and shaking his hand in pain. Oh, sorry, said Boromir, lowering his own sword and moved forward to inquire if he was all right. Pippin was about to show him just how fine he was. He aimed a swift kick to Boromir's ankle, and while he was hopping on one foot in pain, one of the hobbits slammed both hands into his side, knocking him off his feet and onto the ground. For the Shire, said the hobbits, trying to pin him to the ground. Hold him, hold him. Boromir, Strider, and Harry laughed loudly. He's got my arm, said Merry. Suddenly, Harry looked over to where Legolas was. Legolas was watching a dark shadow, turning in the clear sky. What is that? Asked one of the Fellowship. Nothing, just a wisp of cloud, said Gimli, very sure of himself. It's moving fast, said Boromir, standing up. And against the wind. Crabane from Dunland, said Legolas. Hide! Shouted Aragorn loudly. The Fellowship grabbed their belongings and doused the cooking fire. Harry shoved Merry and Pippin under a thick bush. The birds were almost upon them. Harry looked frantically around for shelter. There was none to be had. Harry reached into the bag and touched the diamond. Dear, he thought frantically. A strange sensation flitted, though, his body. His arms and legs were being stretched quickly, and his hands were growing stiff and curled up into fists. His face stretched and his ears grew longer. The hair on his head crawled down his body, and suddenly his world turned black. Strider looked at Harry in amazement. One moment he was there, and then as if in fast forward he turned into a deer, a black-furred stag. The stag got slowly to his feet, staggered slightly, but eventually Harry got used to his new 4 legs. As the carabine flapped closer, the stag bowed his head lower and began to eat the grass. Hide, you foolish boy, hissed Boromir. No, wait, look what he's doing. He's making it appear that no one is near him. Clever lad, said Gimli. Deer are easily skittish. One wouldn't be here if it sensed us, said Legolas from his own hiding place. The dark birds flew across them like a black cloud. Then one bird decided to land beside Harry and hop about, looking for the hidden men. Quickly, Harry brought one of his hooves down on the bird's head, killing the preoccupied bird instantly. Harry leapt from rock to rock until he was on the top of the pile and used his great antlers to ward off the birds. Sometimes his antlers were lucky, and he impaled 2 or 3 birds at a time. But the birds began to swirl around the top of the rocks, pecking him at every chance they could get. Harry continued to pound the birds into the rocks when they got too close to his hooves, and his antlers were drenched in the blood and feathers of the birds. Finally, after what the Fellowship could guess was an hour or more, and with their birds' numbers down by 1/3, the Crabane decided to flee. Once the birds were gone, everyone came out of their hiding place with triumphant smiles. You did it hard, said Pippin, turning to face the stag, but a horrible sight met his eyes. The stag was teetering on its legs as he came down from the rocks, but he couldn't make the last jump. He landed with a heavy thud on the ground. The Fellowship looked at Harry with frightened looks. There were gashes all around his body. Where's his pouch? Maybe we should change him back, said Pippin, running to the fallen leather pouch. Gandalf stopped him from opening it. Changing him back now wouldn't be wise. What sorcery is this? Asked Boromir. Strider pulled a few herbs from a pouch of his own and held them to the wounds. The stag's head reared back and made a low grunting sound. Easy, lad, said Strider soothingly. This herb should help with the pain. After an hour, the stag slowly rose off the ground. Its knees were shaky, and he didn't stay standing for very long. Merry and Pippin spent their time wiping the blood from the antlers, and Sam poured water into a pan for Harry to drink from.
Those birds were spies of Saruman. The path south is being watched. We must take the path of Caradros, he said, looking towards the mountain.
Harry made to stand, but Gandalf stopped him. We'll rest for a while yet, then make for the road over the mountains, said Gandalf gently. We need you strong again, if we hope for you to make it. Sirius was gently changing the bandages on Harry's chest. The old wounds were still not disappearing or healing, and new gashes and cuts kept cropping up. But the strangest thing, Harry was developing more and more muscle. If Sirius wasn't scared of losing Harry, he would have tried bouncing a galleon off his godson's abs. That thought brought a pale smile to his lips, but he was still worried about his little boy. Just then, Bill came in with the radio from the kitchen. I thought that, since you weren't coming back down to the kitchen, and no offense to Harry, it's kind of boring up here. I thought you would like the radio to keep you entertained, said Bill, holding up the radio. Thanks, Bill, I appreciate it, said Sirius with a grin. Just set it down on the table over there. Will do, said Bill. I'll even hook it up for you. Sirius went back to doing his job for the evening when a voice on the Wizarding Wireless Channel broadcast caused him to freeze. Earlier this evening, an attack was made on the home of one Hermione Granger, a student at Hogwarts, School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, and close companion to Harry Potter, who is currently being searched for, due to a fatal illness he has, and must be treated immediately. It has been reported by a Muggle eyewitness that a person meeting the description of the Auror Kingsley Shacklebolt rushed into the Granger household, obviously to warn them of the impending danger. Then 2 cloaked wizards plus a toad-faced witch appeared on the street and blasted the entire house into a fiery inferno. The witch, who perfectly fits the description of one Dolores Jane Umbridge, none other than the Minister of Magic's own senior undersecretary and the current teacher of defense against the dark arts. No one knows why she did it, for not even the Department of Magical Law Enforcement can find her. The minister has neglected to give a statement or denounce his involvement in the unfortunate event. Also, it's been further discovered that the remains of 3 people were discovered in the house. No doubt it was Mrs. and Mr. Granger, and the Auror Kingsley Shacklebolt. What the? Kingsley? Said Sirius with a weak voice. It can't be, said Bill faintly. Bill, go down and tell, said Sirius quickly. I already know, said Dumbledore, looking slightly worn. Dumbledore. What hap? Said Bill. I think I'll let him explain. He just finished telling everyone else downstairs, said Dumbledore with a bright smile, the tiredness wearing slowly away. In slowly came Kingsley. What the hell? Said Bill. All I can say is thank Merlin for transfiguration, said Kingsley. So Hermione's parents are safe too? Said Sirius quickly. They're downstairs, said Kingsley, little shaken, having never apparated before. So, what did you transfigure? Asked Bill quickly. Let's just say they did have 2 lovebirds and 1 rat in their house, said Kingsley. Umbridge, who was parading from one place to another, was busy avoiding the Aurors after her. They seemed to get closer and closer on her heels, but she was able to shake them off in the end. I never should have trusted those blasted men, said Umbridge. Never trust a half-blood, she muttered darkly to herself. Don't they realize that Kingsley was a traitor? Soon she came to the gates of the Malfoy Manor. Finally, someone who understands. He'll be more than happy to lend me some sanctuary. She opened the gates and went straight to the front door. She gave a loud knock on the front door and awaited, looking nervously around, hoping no one had tracked her there. The door opened and saw that it was Lucius Malfoy, a very tired and worn-looking Lucius Malfoy.
Ah, Lucius, might I take refuge here? The Ministry is being completely unreasonable, said Umbridge. She barely took notice of the sneer that appeared on his face.
Of course, Dolores. In fact, I have someone here who would love to speak with you about this matter. And Potter, said Lucius. Oh, good. He needs to be found, said Umbridge eagerly as she swept inside the manor. It's important. It is indeed, said Lucius, closing the door behind her with a loud clunk. He then took it upon himself to lead her towards the large dining room. Is your wife not at home? Asked Umbridge. She is out doing some shopping, said Lucius. Don't you have a house elf to do that for you? Asked Umbridge sweetly. I would rather not talk about that. It's a sore subject, said Lucius coldly. He opened the door slowly and bowed low to the floor. My lord? I have Dolores Umbridge here. She may perhaps have information on the Potter boy, said Lucius. Does she? Said a low hiss-like voice. Umbridge turned a faint shade of white as she saw who was sitting in the armchair across the room. Lord Voldemort.